Story 1. My friends laughed because I didn't order food until the bill came and they demanded that I split it. My name is Emma. I'm 24 years old and I work as an administrative assistant at a digital marketing company. I live alone in a small apartment and, to be honest, my budget is always tight. But I had a group of friends from work, Sarah, Jessica, and Amanda, who always included me in their outings, and I really valued that friendship. The problem is they had a very specific habit that bothered me deeply, but I never had the courage to confront them. Whenever we went out together, the three of them would order the most expensive drinks at the bar, the most elaborate appetizers, the most sophisticated dishes, and then, when it came time to pay, there was always that story of, let's split everything equally among us. For months, I swallowed hard and paid. I paid for Sarah's $15 martinis while I drank water. I paid for Jessica's $18 gourmet appetizers while I ate free peanuts from the counter. I paid for Amanda's $45 main courses while I just watched and made up excuses about being on a diet. They knew about my financial situation. They knew I earned less than a fifth of what they earned. They knew I lived alone and had bills to pay. But still, every Friday it was the same dynamic. They spent like there was no tomorrow, and I paid the bill as if it were my obligation to maintain group harmony. But last Friday at the Olive and Anchor, something inside me broke. It was a happy hour after work, as always. We got there around 6 o'clock in the evening. The bar was packed. Ambient music, that vibe of the weekend beginning. Sarah was radiant because she had closed a big client. Jessica had just returned from a trip to Miami. Amanda was celebrating a promotion. They sat down and immediately started browsing the menu like they knew every item by heart. "The grilled salmon with truffle risotto is divine here," Amanda murmured. "And that midnight in Paris cocktail is a unique experience," Sarah added. I opened my menu and my stomach contracted. The main dishes cost between $40 and $60. The specialty cocktails between $15 and $25. A complete meal there would easily pass $80 with tip. "Girls," I said, trying to sound casual, "I think today I'll just drink something. I'm not very hungry." That's when the laughter started. "Wow, Emma, you always say that," said Jessica, giggling. "When was the last time you ate something when we went out?" Sarah joined the teasing. "It's true. You're the most disciplined person I know. Always resisting temptations. Amanda, that must be why you're always in shape. I'm so envious of your willpower." They laughed as if it were the funniest thing in the world. As if my discipline were a choice, not a financial necessity. As if I resisted food out of willpower, not because I couldn't afford to pay. The waiter approached to take orders. Sarah was first. "I'll have the sea bass with wasabi puree and the Sunset Boulevard cocktail. $1.52 just for her." Jessica ordered the lamb with herb crust and a glass of imported Portuguese wine. Another $48. Amanda chose the lobster with champagne sauce and an artisanal Negroni. Another $55. When it was my turn, they all looked at me expectantly, still with that little smile of someone who was having fun with my eccentricity. "Just sparkling water," I said, closing the menu. The silence was instant and embarrassing. The waiter seemed confused. "Are you sure? Not even an appetizer? Maybe some nachos?" "I'm sure. Thank you." That's when the real joke started. "Guys, Emma is taking this diet very seriously," said Sarah, feigning concern. "Could she be overdoing it?" "Yeah, honey," Jessica agreed. "You can eat something small. It won't hurt." Amanda was more direct. "Or could it be a money issue? Because if it is, we can." "No," I interrupted too quickly, feeling my cheeks burn. "It's not that. I'm just not hungry." They exchanged looks that I couldn't interpret at the time. Now I know they were looks from people who were planning something. Throughout the entire meal, they made sure to highlight how delicious the food was. "Emma, are you sure you don't want to try? This sea bass is divine. Wow, this lamb is perfectly cooked. You're missing out. This champagne sauce is a unique experience." Each comment was a disguised jab. Each compliment about the food was a way to remind me of what I was missing by my own choice. They were having fun with my situation, and I was finally starting to realize it. When they finished eating, Sarah ordered dessert. The Belgian chocolate cake with vanilla ice cream is unmissable, she said, already waving to the waiter. Jessica and Amanda immediately agreed. Another $15 each. I drank my sparkling water and forced smiles while they savored their expensive desserts. I calculated mentally. Each of them had already spent more than $70. I had spent $3. That's when the bill arrived. Sarah grabbed it, looked quickly, and announced naturally. $3. That's when the bill arrived. Sarah grabbed the check, looked quickly, and announced naturally. $3. That's when the bill arrived. Sarah grabbed it, looked quickly, and announced naturally. $2.18. Should we split it 4 ways? That's $54.50 each. My heart stopped. $54.50 for my $3 sparkling water? Wait, I said, my voice coming out louder than intended. I only had water. It doesn't make sense for me to pay $54.50. The mood at the table changed instantly. The giggles stopped. The smiles disappeared. Jessica was the first to speak. Emma, we always split the bill equally. It's easier that way. But I didn't eat anything, I protested. You knew I was only going to drink water. Sarah sighed as if I was being difficult. It's a matter of practicality. And besides, you were here with us. Enjoyed the atmosphere, the company. Enjoyed the atmosphere? I repeated incredulously. You want me to pay $54.50 for enjoying the atmosphere? Amanda tried to be diplomatic. Look, Emma, we understand your situation, but when you go out in a group, it's normal to split the costs. It's a matter of social etiquette. Social etiquette. As if I were rude for not wanting to pay for food I didn't eat. Girls, I said, trying to stay calm. I can pay my fair share. $3 for the water plus proportional tip. That's about $4. The silence that followed was loaded with tension. Other people at nearby tables started looking in our direction. Sarah put her card back in her purse, visibly irritated. You know what, Emma? This is very embarrassing. We've always split everything, and it was never a problem. It was never a problem because I always paid quietly, I replied, feeling a courage I didn't know I had. But this time, I'm not paying for your dishes. Jessica shook her head disapprovingly. What an unpleasant situation. Now we'll have to explain to the waiter. Split the bill. It was incredible. They were making me feel guilty for not wanting to pay $54.50 for $3 water. I was the villain for establishing a basic boundary. You can explain to the waiter, I said, getting up and grabbing my purse. I'm not paying for your food. Never again. I left $4 on the table, more than enough to cover my water with a generous tip, and left the restaurant with trembling legs but my head held high. Behind me, I heard Sarah calling the waiter. Sorry, but we're going to need to split the bill. I got home and collapsed on the couch, still processing what had happened. For months, I had been the idiot who paid for others without questioning. For months, they laughed at my discipline, knowing exactly why I didn't eat. They knew I didn't have money and found it funny. They knew I struggled to pay their share and didn't care. Worse, they had fun with it. But as painful as it was to admit, I had allowed it. I had accepted this dynamic for months because I didn't want to lose my friends, because I thought it was better to be exploited than to be alone. That night, lying in bed, I made a decision. Never again. Never again would I pay for others out of fear of confrontation. Never again would I accept being treated like a doormat because of money. I had no idea that this decision would change everything and that things were just beginning. The confrontation begins. On Monday, I arrived at the office prepared for some kind of tension. Sarah, Jessica, and Amanda were in the break room having coffee, talking quietly among themselves. When they saw me, the conversation stopped abruptly. Good morning, girls, I greeted normally. Good morning, they replied in chorus. But the atmosphere was strange, cold. Throughout the morning, I noticed sideways glances, whispers that stopped when I approached. At lunchtime, they left together without inviting me, something that had never happened before. It was Carla from HR who told me what was going on. Emma, she said, approaching my desk at the end of the afternoon. Can I talk to you for a minute? We went to the empty meeting room. Carla closed the door and sat across from me with a worried expression. Look, I don't know if I should tell you this, but the girls are spreading that you caused a scene at the restaurant on Friday, that you refused to pay your share of the bill and left them in an embarrassing situation. My blood boiled. They said that Sarah was in the kitchen telling a bunch of people that you all went to dinner together, and when it came time to split the bill, you made a drama because you didn't want to pay. According to her, you always accept invitations, but then make trouble when it's time to pay. I was shaking with rage. They had completely distorted the story. In their version, I was the freeloader, the one who caused problems over money. Carla, can I tell you what really happened? She nodded, and I told her everything. How they always ordered the most expensive things knowing my financial situation. How I always ended up paying for others. How on Friday I finally established a limit by refusing to pay $54.50 for $3 water. Wow, said Carla when I finished. That changes everything. They really made it seem like you were the problematic one in the story. And now everyone in the office must be thinking I'm stingy and difficult. Carla sighed. Some colleagues did comment. But now that I know your version, I can talk to some people, clarify things discreetly. I thanked Carla, but I knew the damage was already done. Their narrative had spread first, and it was always harder to correct a distorted story than to tell the truth from the beginning. During the rest of the week, I felt the environment changing around me. Some people treated me with subtle coldness. Others avoided talking about money or plans to go out when I was around. Sarah, Jessica, and Amanda acted as if nothing had happened, but no longer included me in conversations about outings or events. That's when I received an unexpected invitation. On Thursday, my phone buzzed with a message from a number I took a while to recognize. It was from Brenda, a colleague from finance who I rarely talk to beyond basic greetings. Hi, Emma. A group of us is going to have a happy hour on Friday at Rusty Anchor. Nothing too fancy, just to relax after the week. Want to come? I hesitated. After everything that had happened, the idea of going out with work colleagues made me anxious. But at the same time, I didn't want to isolate myself completely. Who's going to be there? I asked. Me, Marcus from IT, Anna from accounting, John from marketing, and 2 or 3 other people. Chill people. Rusty Anchor was a much simpler bar than Olive and Anchor. Affordable beers, homemade snacks, casual atmosphere. Nothing like the sophisticated places that Sarah and her group frequented. Okay, I'll go. What time? New friends, new perspectives. On Friday after work, I went to Rusty Anchor with cautious expectations. The place was exactly as I imagined. Small, cozy, with classic rock music playing softly and decoration that wasn't trying to impress anyone. Brenda was already there with the group. Marcus, a guy in his 30s with a scruffy beard and a very relaxed personality. Anna, a 40-year-old woman, mother of 2 children, always friendly, but whom I had never had a chance to get to know better. John, a guy my age who had recently joined the company. Emma, so good that you came, said Brenda, giving me a genuine hug. We sat at a round table and Marcus immediately asked, "What are you all going to have?" The first round is on me. First round on someone else. What a revolutionary concept. I ordered a canned beer. Nothing sophisticated. Anna ordered a draft beer. John wanted a simple gin and tonic. Nobody was trying to impress anyone with expensive orders. The conversation flowed naturally. We talked about work, but also about movies, music, trips we'd like to take. Marcus told hilarious stories about the IT problems he solved. Anna talked about the craziness of raising 2 teenagers. John shared his adventures as a recent graduate trying to understand adult life. And for the first time in months, I felt relaxed going out with work colleagues. When it came time to order another round, John offered to pay. Then Anna insisted on paying for the third. There was no drama, no astronomical bill, no unfair division. More importantly, nobody teased me for ordering just beer. Nobody commented on my discipline or made jokes about willpower. They simply accepted me as part of the group. It was when Brenda brought up the subject I was avoiding. "Emma," she said during a pause in the conversation, "can I say something?" I know it's none of my business, but I heard some comments at the office about that situation at the restaurant last week. My stomach contracted. Marcus, Anna, and John looked at me with genuine interest. Not malicious. What situation? Asked Marcus. I sighed. I related the whole story. The months paying for others, the teasing about my discipline, the demand to pay $54.50 for $3 water, my refusal, and the distorted narrative that spread afterward. When I finished, there was a moment of silence. Man, said Marcus, that's messed up. They really made you pay for the others for months, and on top of that, they spread that you were the problematic one. John added, indignant. Anna shook her head. That's exploitation. And I thought it was just in my head. What do you mean? I asked. I've gone out with them a few times, Anna explained. I always thought there was something strange. They always ordered the most expensive dishes, and there was always that pressure to split everything equally. I stopped accepting invitations because it was getting heavy for my budget. Me too, said Brenda. I went once and spent almost $100 in one night. Never wanted to repeat that. Marcus laughed humorlessly. They tried to invite me a couple of times, but I always made excuses. I had a strange feeling about it. John agreed. Yeah, I noticed that there are people in the office who kind of avoid going out with them. Now I understand why. I wasn't alone. Other people had noticed the toxic pattern of Sarah, Jessica, and Amanda. Other people had distanced themselves because of it. You know what irritates me most? Said Anna. They earn much more than most of us and still make others pay for their luxuries. Exactly, Marcus agreed. If they want to eat at expensive restaurants, they should pay out of their own pocket, not exploit colleagues. You did the right thing, Emma, said Brenda firmly. You had to establish boundaries. For the first time since Friday, I felt validated. My reaction hadn't been exaggerated. My boundary hadn't been unfair. I had done the right thing. We stayed later than planned, talking and laughing. When it came time to leave, the total bill was less than $40 for 5 people. We split it equally, $8 each, and there was still enough left for a generous tip. $8. A whole night of genuine fun for $8. The war escalates. Throughout the following week, our new friendship solidified. Marcus created a WhatsApp group called Rusty Crew, and we started planning more casual outings. A coffee after work here, a snack there, hallway conversations that naturally extended. It was incredible how different it was to have friendships without financial pressure. When we went out, everyone ordered what they wanted and could pay for. If someone was tight one month, the others understood and adjusted plans. If someone wanted to spend more, they paid their own bill without involving others. But things with Sarah, Jessica, and Amanda were far from over. On Wednesday, I received a message from Sarah on WhatsApp. Hi, Emma. We're going to have a barbecue at my sister's house on Saturday. It'll be very casual. Everyone brings something. How about it? I stared at the message in disbelief. After a week of total coldness, after spreading lies about me, now they wanted to include me again. Hi, Sarah. Who else is going? I replied, curious to understand the game. Oh, the usual group. About 15 people. We thought of you to bring the drinks. You have good taste for these things. The drinks for 15 people. At a Saturday-long barbecue. I did quick calculations in my head. At least $200 in beer, soda, water, and ice. Maybe $300 if I wanted to guarantee enough variety. It was obvious what was happening. They had given me the most expensive responsibility of the event. Probably after laughing among themselves about how I had saved money at dinner. But this time I knew exactly how to play their game. Sure, I'd love to help with the drinks. I'll take care of everything. I replied with fake enthusiasm. Sarah must have been surprised by my positive reaction because she took a while to respond. That's great. The party is at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'll send you the address. I spent the rest of the week planning. I researched promotions at 3 different markets. I found a clearance on sodas close to expiration, still good for consumption, but with a 70% discount. I got beer on sale in an end-of-lot promotion. I bought water in 5L jugs, much cheaper than individual bottles. In total, I spent $52, much less than they expected, and all known brands. Nothing that could be criticized. Saturday arrived, and I loaded my car with enough drinks for a small army. My sister's house was beautiful, a modern-style construction with a large backyard, pool, and complete gourmet area. "Wow, Emma, you really went all out," said Amanda when she saw me unloading the drinks. There was something in her tone that I couldn't identify. Sarah appeared wearing a summer dress that cost more than my weekly income. "Such efficiency. Look at the variety you brought." Jessica approached to help organize everything on a side table. Very well thought out, separating by type. It looks super organized. The barbecue was really good. People brought elaborate salads, gourmet sides, artisanal desserts. My contribution of drinks seemed almost basic next to so much sophistication, but it was fulfilling its role. Everyone was drinking, laughing, enjoying the sun. I talked to some people I didn't know, took photos, participated in activities. On the outside, everything seemed normal. But around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I went to get my purse that I had forgotten in the car. And when I came back through the kitchen, I heard voices coming from the laundry room. It was Sarah talking quietly with 2 other people. She really showed up after all that scene at the restaurant. And she still brought the cheapest drinks she could find. My blood froze. I stopped behind the door, heart racing. A female voice I recognized as Sarah's cousin responded, "Don't you think you're being a little hard on her?" Jessica joined the conversation. "Hard? She caused the biggest fuss last Friday. Left us in a super embarrassing situation. And today just proves that she can't keep up with our level," continued Sarah. "Look at the brand she brought. Everything as cheap as possible." Amanda entered the conversation. "It's not our fault if she can't afford it. But if she accepts to participate, she has to take on the responsibilities." Sarah's cousin seemed uncomfortable. "But you know, she earns much less." "So what?" Jessica cut in. "Everyone has their priorities. If she prioritized participating in events instead of, I don't know what, she could manage." "Exactly," agreed Sarah. "It's a matter of choice. We choose to invest in our social life. She chooses to make drama. Choice. As if I chose to earn less. As if I chose to struggle. The funny thing is that she still came after all the scandals she made," continued Amanda. "Some people really have no sense." I went back to the backyard with my mind boiling. They were all there laughing, drinking my drinks, pretending normally. Sarah waved when she saw me. "Hey Emma, I was missing you. Come here." We were talking about next week's projects. I forced a smile and joined the group. Throughout the afternoon, I observed every interaction with new eyes. Every seemingly innocent comment now had a second layer of meaning. "The drinks are great, Emma," said Jessica, raising a beer can. "You always make good choices." Was it a compliment or veiled sarcasm about my promotion research? When the barbecue was ending, I helped collect things, trying to keep up appearances until I could leave. "Thanks for all the help, Emma," said Amanda when I was saying goodbye. "You're a sweetheart." In the car driving home, I replayed the conversation I heard dozens of times in my head. Every word, every tone, every justification they made. They genuinely believed they were right, that I was the problem, that I made bad choices and then created drama. To them, I was the clueless person who didn't know my place. The perfect opportunity. Monday arrived. I went to work with completely different energy. No longer the anxiety of wanting to please or the insecurity of being judged. I knew exactly where I stood now. During breakfast, Jessica approached my desk with that fake smile I now recognized perfectly. "Hey Emma, the barbecue on Saturday was really nice, right? Amanda was commenting on how helpful you were with everything." "It was great." "Jess, thanks for including me," I replied naturally. "We were thinking about organizing a surprise birthday party for Sarah in 2 weeks. Would you be up for helping with the organization?" There it was. The next test, the next game. Sure. It would be an honor. "What did you have in mind?" Jessica smiled with that expression I now knew was predatory. "We were thinking about Azure, that new sophisticated restaurant downtown. Reservation for 12 people. You could be responsible for the decoration and cake." Azure. I knew it by name. a high-end restaurant where dishes cost between $80 and $120. And they wanted me to fund decoration and cake for 12 people. Easily $300 or more. How awesome. When is it again? I asked, maintaining enthusiasm. Saturday in 2 weeks. I know it's tight, but we trust your good taste. Good taste. As if my financial situation were a matter of choice and not reality. Let me organize my schedule and confirm with you today. Okay. As soon as Jessica walked away, I started planning. Not what they expected, me spending money I didn't have to impress them, but my own strategy. Actually, I had been organizing small events as a hobby for some years. Birthday parties for family, friends, simple celebrations. I had some supplier contacts and knew how to make things look beautiful without spending much. I spent 2 weeks planning meticulously. I got decorations rented for a fair price. Negotiated a beautiful but economical cake with a small bakery I knew. Total, $240. Expensive for me, but doable if I put it on the credit card. And more importantly, I had a plan they would never expect. Jessica. I called when I saw her in the hallway. I confirmed. I can take care of the decoration and cake. She seemed genuinely surprised. Really? That's incredible. Sarah is going to be emotional. I have some ideas that will make everything beautiful, I replied. And I really did. During the 2 weeks, I pretended to be super excited. I sent messages in the group asking about Sarah's preferences, talking about the surprises I was preparing, showing myself completely involved. Sarah was radiant. Girls, I can't even sleep from anxiety. It's going to be the most special birthday of my life. Amanda agreed. For sure. Our organizer is killing it. Our organizer. As if I were their employee. On Friday, I finalized all preparations. The decoration was really beautiful. Gold and pink tones, elegant centerpieces, metallic balloons. The cake was a work of art. 2 tiers, chocolate frosting, sugar flowers. Saturday morning, I arrived at Azure 2 hours early to set everything up. The restaurant was even more impressive inside than in the photos. Crystal chandeliers, noble wood furniture, panoramic city view. The manager helped me organize the reserve table. It looks spectacular, he said when we finished. Your friend is going to be emotional. The guests started arriving at 7. Sarah entered radiant, wearing a dress that cost more than 3 weeks of my income. My God! It's perfect! She exclaimed with tears in her eyes, hugging me tight. Everyone complimented the decoration. The photos were magazine-worthy. The cake was an absolute success. I had exceeded all expectations. When the waiter brought the menus, Sarah announced generously, "Girls, today is a party. Order whatever you want." She didn't say who would pay, but from the way she spoke, it seemed like it would be her. I only ordered a Caesar salad as an appetizer and sparkling water. I'm still on that diet, I explained when Sarah asked why I wasn't ordering more. But don't worry, I'm super happy celebrating with you. Throughout the entire dinner, I was the life of the party. I made emotional toasts, started animated conversations, took hundreds of photos of the birthday girl. I was radiant, participative, being the best friend they could want. The cake arrived with lit candles. Sarah blew them out emotionally. Everyone sang happy birthday and applauded. It was a perfect moment, exactly as she had dreamed. Then the bill came, $1,500 for 12 people. Sarah grabbed the check and to my surprise, her expression completely changed. She had clearly forgotten how much a party at Azure would cost. Let's split it among everyone, she announced, trying to maintain composure. That's $125 each. That's when I played my decisive card. Girls, I said, getting up from the chair. It was a magical night, but I need to leave now. I have an early commitment tomorrow. I grabbed my purse and started saying goodbye. Sarah, happy birthday. I hope it was everything you dreamed of. Sarah seemed confused. But what about the bill? Oh, I only had salad and water. I left $20 on the table. Covers my part with a generous tip. My real contribution was already the decoration and cake I organized and paid for. Thank you for letting me be part of this. and I left the restaurant with a radiant smile, leaving behind a sepulchral silence. I knew exactly what was happening in there. They had planned to make me pay more than $100 for a dinner I barely touched, after I had already spent $240 organizing the entire party. But this time I was smarter. The war intensifies. In the car, my phone exploded. Sarah, Jessica, Amanda all calling at the same time. I let them all go to voicemail. The messages started polite. Emma, where did you go? Come back here. Then became desperate. You can't leave like that. We have to split the bill. And finally became aggressive. How rude. You organized the party. You have an obligation to stay until the end. I only replied to one message. Girls, I organized and paid for all the decoration and cake. My contribution was already more than enough. I hope you enjoyed the party. Jessica's response came immediately. This isn't fair. You knew how it worked. I did know, I replied. That's why I made clear from the beginning what my part would be. Sarah's response surprised me with its fury. You humiliated us in front of everyone. What kind of friend does that? The kind who doesn't accept being exploited anymore, I replied. Amanda tried a more conciliatory tone. Emma, we always split everything. That's how it works among friends. No, I replied. That's how you exploited those who earn less. Now it's over. The messages stopped for a few hours. Then Sarah sent one last one. You're going to regret this. Monday at the office was a declaration of war. They arrived visibly furious. During coffee, I heard Jessica telling other colleagues. It was a public humiliation. On Saturday, we organized a birthday party. And when it came time to pay, one person simply abandoned the group and left everyone paying for her. This time, they didn't just distort the story, they completely inverted it. Wow, how horrible, said Marina. What kind of person does that? Exactly, agreed Jessica. We trusted her to organize. She agreed to participate and at the H-hour, simply fled from responsibility. I was passing with my coffee when I heard this. I stopped and turned to the group. Wow, what a terrible story, I said, approaching. What party are you talking about? Jessica was visibly uncomfortable but maintained the lie. A party we organized on Saturday. One person committed and then left us hanging. Interesting, I replied calmly. I also organized a party on Saturday. I spent $240 of my own money on decoration and cake, set everything up alone, made the event beautiful, and then paid my individual bill. $20 for salad and water. What a coincidence. The silence was embarrassing. Marina and the other colleagues looked from Jessica to me, clearly confused. Imagine if after organizing and paying for all that, they still wanted me to pay another $125 for a salad. I continued, laughing as if the absurdity were obvious. It would be like I was obligated to pay for others' food just because I organized the event. How crazy, right? Marina nodded. Wow, that would be unfair. If you already organized everything. Jessica tried to defend herself. But when you participate in a group, there's an implicit agreement. Implicit agreement? I repeated. Like, if I organize a party and pay for decoration, I'm obligated to pay for others' food, too? What kind of agreement is that? The other colleagues seemed increasingly on my side. Jessica realized she was losing and walked away, irritated. But that was just the beginning. Throughout that week, Sarah, Jessica, and Amanda intensified the campaign against me. They spread increasingly distorted versions of the story. According to them, I was a freeloader, irresponsible, someone who accepted responsibilities and then ran from them. Emma has always been weird about money. I heard Amanda commenting in the break room. She accepts invitations but then makes a fuss when it's time to pay. It's a behavioral pattern, agreed Sarah. We tried to include her out of pity, but it got to a point where it wasn't possible anymore. Out of pity, as if they were charitable, including me in their groups. Some people in the office started treating me coldly. Others avoided talking about money when I was around. The environment became heavy, but I wasn't alone. Marcus, Brenda, Anna, and John, my new group of friends, were indignant when they learned about the new version of the story. "They're spreading that you organized a party and then refused to pay?" asked Marcus, incredulous. "When you had already paid for the organization? It's impressively dishonest," said Brenda. "Distorting facts like that." Anna shook her head. "They really think they can rewrite reality." It was John who suggested, "You know what you should do? Show the receipts for decoration and cake. Then everyone sees how much you spent." It was a good idea. I had kept all the receipts. On Thursday, when I heard Sarah telling a particularly distorted version of the story in the break room, where I was a freeloader who organized a cheap party and then refused to pay the bill, I decided to act. "Sarah," I said, approaching with a folder in hand, "are you talking about your birthday party?" She tensed. I was explaining to Carla how some people have no responsibility. "Good thing you brought that up," I said, opening the folder. I brought the receipts to show everyone how much it costs to organize. I spread the receipts on the break room table. Rented decoration, $85. Personalized cake, $120. Flowers and candles, $35. Total, $240. "Wow," said Carla, looking at the receipts. "You spent all that?" "Of course," I replied. "It was Sarah's birthday. I wanted it to be special." Sarah was visibly uncomfortable. "Emma, that's not the point." "How is it not?" I asked innocently. "You were explaining about responsibility. I thought it was important to show that I took my responsibility, organized, and paid for all this. And then I still paid my own bill at the restaurant." Carla calculated quickly. "So, you spent $240 on the party and still paid for your food." "Exactly. $20 for salad and water. Total of $260, concluded Carla. "And even so, they wanted you to pay another $125. Sarah tried to explain herself. "It's that when you participate in a group, but..." She had already participated. Carla cut in. "With $260, more than double what any other person spent." The math was simple and irrefutable. Sarah left the break room unable to defend herself. The truth comes to light. The story of the receipts spread quickly through the office. People began to understand that I wasn't the freeloader in the story. It was the opposite. "Wow, Emma spent more than $250 and they still wanted her to pay more. That's a lot of nerve," another person replied. Their narrative began to crumble, but they didn't give up. On Friday, Jessica tried a different approach. She came to talk to me at the end of work. "Emma, I think there was a misunderstanding about this whole situation." "What misunderstanding?" I asked. "The issue isn't money," she said. "It's about loyalty to the group, about not abandoning friends in a difficult situation." Difficult situation. When you left the restaurant, we were left in an embarrassing situation. We had to explain to the waiter, reorganized the bill. "Jessica," I said calmly, "I organized the entire party, spent $240 out of my pocket, and still paid my own bill. How is that abandonment?" "But you left before the end," she insisted. "That's not done." It was incredible. She genuinely believed I had an obligation to stay and pay for others' food. "What if I had stayed and refused to pay the $125? I asked. "That would be different. At least you would have stayed to talk." "To have you pressure me until I gave in?" Jessica hesitated. "To resolve things civilly." "Civilly? Like you're doing now, spreading lies about me." "They're not lies." She defended herself. "It's our perspective of the facts." Perspective. That's how they justified the distortions. "Jessica, can I ask you something? Do you really think it was fair for me to pay $125 after already spending $240? She thought for a moment. "When you accept to participate in an event, you accept the responsibilities that come with it. Even spending more than any other person, it's a matter of principle," she said, as if that explained everything. Principle. For them, the principle was that I should pay for others regardless of how much I had already contributed. "I understand," I said. "Thank you for clarifying." Jessica seemed hopeful. "So, Can we resolve this? Resolve what? Go back to being friends. Forget all this confusion. There's nothing to resolve, Jessica. You made clear you think it's normal to exploit me financially. I made clear I don't accept that anymore. It's not exploitation, she protested. It's how groups of friends work. No, I replied. It's how you think they should work. She sighed, frustrated. You're being very difficult. I'm being fair to myself. Jessica walked away, clearly irritated. Later, I heard her commenting to Amanda, Emma is impossible. She doesn't even want to talk about resolving things. For them, resolving meant me going back to accepting being exploited. The unexpected success. But while they continued trying to bring me down, something interesting was happening. Several people in the office had seen the photos of Sarah's birthday party on Instagram. The decoration had really been impressive. Emma, said Marina, approaching me on Monday. I saw the photos of the party you organized. It was beautiful. Thank you. Do you do this professionally? No. It was just a favor for a colleague. Because I was looking for someone to organize my sister's wedding. Would you be interested? My heart raced. A wedding? That would be a real opportunity. Sure. I'd love to talk about it. Marina gave me her sister's contact and we scheduled a meeting for the end of the week. During the week, 2 more people approached me. The director's secretary wanted someone to organize a corporate party. A colleague from finance was planning a quinceañera for her daughter. I was discovering I had real talent for this. And more importantly, I was discovering a way to earn extra money doing something I enjoyed. On Thursday, Carla from HR called me for a conversation. Emma, we're organizing the company's year-end party. Would you help us? It would be official freelance work. Of course, paid. My heart raced even more. An official opportunity recognizing my talent. Sure, I'd love to. Everyone was impressed with that birthday party. Even Sarah herself couldn't stop praising your work to management. Interesting. The Sarah who was furious with me was praising my work to the company. It's for 200 people, so it's a big project. We'll schedule a meeting to discuss details. 200 people. A project that could yield significant money and open doors to other jobs. Leaving the meeting, I passed by Sarah's desk. She looked up from the computer and for the first time in weeks there was no hostility in her gaze. There was something I couldn't identify. Hi, she said quietly. I heard you're going to organize the company party. Yeah, looks like it. It's quite an opportunity, she said, and there was a note of respect in her voice. I'm excited, I replied. She hesitated as if she wanted to say something more, but just nodded and went back to work. The turnaround. The year-end party was an absolute success. I received compliments from all levels of the company and $2,000 for the work. More importantly, I got 8 contacts from other companies interested in my services. Sarah, Jessica, and Amanda were at the party trying to act normally, but the dynamic had changed forever. I was no longer the needy one they could exploit. During the party, several people approached me praising my work. You have natural talent. Have you thought about starting your own company? Give me your contact. Around 10 o'clock, Amanda approached. Congratulations on the party. It's incredible. Thank you, Amanda. We were thinking, she hesitated. How about we talk? Just the 4 of us to clarify things. What kind of clarification? Resolve our problems. Go back to being friends. I stared at her for a moment. Amanda, do you really think I should have paid $125 that night? After already spending $240. She became uncomfortable. It's complicated. No, I said. It's simple. Do you think yes or no? When you go out in a group, there's an understanding. Answer yes or no. I insisted. Amanda sighed. We always split everything. That doesn't answer my question. She looked around as if seeking support and finally said, Maybe it was a little unfair. A little? Okay, it was unfair. She admitted reluctantly. But you also overreacted. How did I overreact leaving like that? Causing embarrassment. It was incredible. Even admitting they had been unfair, they still thought I had overreacted. Amanda, You exploited me for months. When I finally established a boundary, you spread lies about me. And you think I overreacted. They weren't lies. She defended. It was our interpretation. Interpretation. You said I refused to pay after organizing a cheap party. I spent $240. Where's the interpretation there? Amanda looked down. Maybe we expressed ourselves poorly. You didn't express yourselves poorly. You deliberately lied. Emma, please. We can get over this. Why should I want to get over it? Because we were friends. No, I said calmly. You were predators and I was the prey. Now that I found my place, you want to go back to the old dynamic. It's not that. It's exactly that. Amanda, you're only approaching because you saw I don't need you anymore. Actually, I'm doing better without you. And it was true. My life had improved in every aspect since I distanced myself from them. Amanda tried once more. We can change. No, I replied. You can change, but that doesn't interest me anymore. I found people who truly respect me. She walked away, visibly frustrated. The new beginning. 6 months later, I was in my own office. Luna events inspired by Luna Cafe, where I sometimes met with my real friends to plan. My colleague's sister's wedding was an absolute success. The photos circulated on social media, generating a flood of clients. I had found my calling. Sarah, Jessica, and Amanda continued at the company. Our paths occasionally crossed in the hallways. The relationship was cordial but distant. They greeted me politely, sometimes even complimented my work, but there was always an underlying tension. They never fully admitted they were wrong. In their view, there were misunderstandings and overreactions on both sides. They continued believing their way of splitting bills was normal and fair. A year later, I received a message from Amanda on LinkedIn. I saw your company is growing a lot. Congratulations. You always had talent for these things. I replied politely, thank you, Amanda. I hope you're doing well, too. But I didn't feel like resuming contact. Some bridges, once burned, don't need to be rebuilt. During a meeting with a new client, she commented, you seem very confident for someone so young. I smiled, remembering how it all started. I learned that establishing boundaries is the foundation of any healthy relationship, personal or professional. And how did you learn that? Through a restaurant bill I refused to pay unfairly. She laughed, thinking I was joking. But it was true. That night at Olive and Anchor had completely changed my life. Today, when I go out with my real friends, people who respect me regardless of my budget, we sometimes tell this story and laugh. Marcus always says, you turned their meanness into your financial independence. And he's right. They thought they were humiliating me, putting me in my place. Actually, they forced me to discover my true worth. It seems ironic, but it was the best favor anyone ever did me, even if it wasn't intentional. Establishing boundaries, even when uncomfortable, is essential to maintain self-esteem and find genuine relationships. And sometimes the people who try to diminish us end up being the catalyst for our greatest transformation. Today, I know my worth isn't measured by what I can pay, but by what I no longer accept tolerating. And that's priceless. Now on to the next story. Story 2. I was never the type to keep score. Not when it came to family. At least for most of my life, I believed that showing up for people, being generous, quietly dependable, the one who handled things without making a fuss, would be enough. That it would speak for itself. But I've learned something over the past year, and especially during one unforgettable family dinner. Sometimes silence doesn't earn you respect. Sometimes it just makes you invisible. My name's Bryson. I'm 37. I run a small portfolio of businesses, some real estate, a digital marketing agency, and a couple investments in local coffee shops and startups. I wouldn't say I'm wealthy in the private jet sense, but I'm definitely doing well enough that money hasn't been something I've had to worry about in a long time. But here's the thing about family. They don't always see who you've become. They lock you into the version of you they're most comfortable with. The one who left town at 22, who chased the money, who only comes back for holidays and birthdays and sends checks instead of hugs. I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, middle of nowhere. Really, My parents, James and Darlene, are high school sweethearts, very salt of the earth people. My dad worked in a factory his whole life until he got laid off in his late 50s. My mom cleaned houses, sometimes did child care. We weren't poor, but we were always on the edge of something breaking. I moved out as soon as I could. College first, then jobs in the city, then my own thing. And yeah, I got lucky. I built something. But the more successful I became, the more distant I felt from the people I loved. I always made sure to help out quietly. If my parents needed a new fridge, it showed up. When their car died, I just happened to have a client who donated one. When my dad was diagnosed with a heart condition 2 years ago and didn't have great insurance, I told them not to worry. I framed it as, I've got some business write-offs I need to make anyway. Like I was doing it for taxes. Truth is, I paid off over $80,000 in medical bills last year without blinking. They never asked. I offered, but I didn't make a big deal out of it. I figured that's what a good son does. You don't tally it up. You don't look for applause. But there's someone in my family who definitely does. My younger brother, Caleb, is 34. He stayed in town, works a regular 9 to 5 at a car dealership, and lives 5 minutes from my parents' place. He's always been the loyal son, the one who mows their lawn, drives them to doctor's appointments, helps around the house. And I don't want to diminish that. It matters. But there's always been this quiet tension between us, like he's measuring himself against me and always coming up short, even when I'm not competing. And instead of talking about it, he lets it seep out in passive-aggressive jabs. He makes these comments that sting more than they should. And for the longest time, I let them slide because I didn't want to cause waves. I thought maybe I deserved it for leaving. Then came the anniversary dinner. My parents hit 40 years of marriage this past summer. Caleb organized a big dinner at this rustic local venue that used to be a barn and now serves overpriced steak and potatoes with craft beer. It was beautiful, fairy lights, vintage tableware, the whole thing. He did a great job putting it together, and I told him so. I even helped cover the cost. Not that anyone knew. I Venmo'd him a chunk without asking for recognition. Just wanted to support. My girlfriend, Elise, came with me. We've been dating for a couple years now. She's poised, kind, sharp, and immediately clocked the weird energy the second we walked in. You know that feeling when you enter a room and everyone's already decided how they feel about you? Yeah, it was like that. We sat at a long table with about 25 family and friends, cousins, aunts, some old neighbors, my parents' church friends. Started out lovely. Everyone was chatting, laughing. Then it came time for the toast. Caleb stood up first. He gave a heartfelt little speech about how our parents' love was a beacon of stability in his life, how he learned what commitment looked like by watching them. It was sweet. Everyone clapped. My mom wiped her eyes. Then my dad nodded at me and said, "Bryson, you want to say something?" I hadn't planned on it, but I stood. I kept it simple. I raised my glass and said, "To Mom and Dad for teaching us love, sacrifice, and the kind of hard work that builds not just a life, but a legacy. I wouldn't be the man I am today without you both." I looked at them as I said it, and for a moment my dad smiled like he meant it. Then Caleb laughed. Just one of those sharp exhales through the nose like he couldn't help himself. I glanced over. He shook his head and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "You mean everything I did while you ran off to play rich businessman?" The laughter around the table started small, nervous, but it grew. My dad actually chuckled. My mom gave Caleb a light shove on the arm like he was just being cheeky. My aunt snorted into her wine. I forced a tight smile, raised my glass again, and sat down, heart thudding against my ribs like a warning drum. Elise didn't laugh. She reached under the table and touched my knee just once, like she was anchoring me. I didn't say anything. Not then. Not when Caleb made another joke later about me probably writing off the dinner as a business expense. Not when my dad called him the real MVP of the family for always being there. Not even when I caught my mom glancing at me like I was a guest instead of her firstborn son. But something cracked that night, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. It wasn't just the disrespect. It was how easy it was for them to laugh at me, how easily my quiet contributions had been erased. I'd never asked for recognition, but I'd assumed deep down that it would come. that the truth mattered. But maybe the truth only matters if you speak it. That night I didn't sleep. Elise curled up beside me at the hotel, her breathing soft and steady. And I just lay there staring at the ceiling, running through every moment over the last 10 years. Every bill I covered, every flight I booked, every time I dropped everything to come home for them, and how none of it seemed to matter because I didn't wave it around like a flag. The next morning, over black coffee and cold eggs, Elise said gently, "I know that look. What are you thinking?" And I said, "I'm done letting them rewrite the story." Because in my briefcase, in the backseat of my car, was a folder I'd brought with me by chance. Inside were the receipts, literal and metaphorical copies of the paid invoices from my dad's cardiologist and hospital, the email exchanges with the billing office, the bank wires. I hadn't planned on showing them. I never planned on showing them, but that was before the toast. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that sometimes the only way to get people to see you is to make them look. So I waited. I waited until the second half of the dinner after dessert, when people were starting to stand, stretch, and mingle. I waited until my mom tapped her glass and said, "Before everyone goes, just one last thank you for coming tonight and helping us celebrate. We're so proud of our boys." And then I stood. I took out the folder and I said, "I have something I'd like to add." And just like that, every eye in the room turned to me. And none of them had any idea what was about to happen. The room went quiet the way a room does when someone stands who isn't supposed to. Not angry quiet, confused quiet. A couple cousins half laughed, assuming I was going to make a toast or crack a late joke. My dad blinked at me like he'd forgotten I was still here. My mom's smile was frozen in place, somewhere between polite and nervous. Caleb leaned back in his chair with that smug, lazy slouch of his, arms folded, already smirking. And me? My hands were shaking. Not visibly, not enough for anyone to notice unless they were really watching. But I could feel it, that slight tremble just beneath the skin. I've spoken in front of boardrooms filled with people wearing suits that cost more than my childhood home. But standing there in that rustic venue in front of people who had known me since diapers, that took a different kind of courage. I wasn't planning to say anything. I began, my voice steady, but quieter than usual. And I certainly didn't bring this to make a scene, but I think maybe it's time we put a few things on the table. A few people chuckled nervously. My mom tilted her head, confused. My dad's brow furrowed. Caleb didn't move. I placed the folder gently on the table in front of me and opened it. Inside were a few sheets of paper. Just a few. I'd picked them carefully. The summary of the hospital charges, the final invoice showing a zero balance, the wire transfer confirmation from my business account, and the thank you email from the hospital administrator. "I want to tell you all a quick story," I said, glancing at the papers, but not reading from them. "Last year, when Dad's heart condition worsened, there were a lot of bills. Some of you know how expensive it can get. Surgeries, follow-ups, prescriptions. And because of some gaps in insurance coverage and timing issues, a lot of that landed squarely on their shoulders." My mom shifted in her seat. My dad's face turned a shade redder. Caleb scoffed audibly and said under his breath, "Oh boy, here we go." I ignored him. I didn't want them to stress about it. I didn't want them to have to choose between treatment and peace of mind. So, I stepped in quietly, privately. I called the billing office. I worked with the hospital. I paid the entire balance off. Over $80,000. A silence felt like someone had sucked the air out of the room. My mom's mouth parted. My dad opened his to speak, but didn't. "And I never brought it up," I continued, "because I didn't want credit. I just wanted Dad to be okay. I wanted our family to be okay." Caleb stood. "Wow," he said, clapping once, sarcastic and slow. "So, this is your big moment, huh? You want applause? A statue in the backyard? You couldn't just let us have one night." My jaw tensed. I stared at him hard. "I didn't bring this up to one-up you, Caleb," I said. "But you made it personal when you joked during the toast that I ran off to play rich businessman while you did all the real work. You made it sound like I abandoned the family, like I've just been writing checks and disappearing." He threw his hands up. "You did disappear, Bryson. You don't call. You don't show up unless it's convenient. You send gifts like it's supposed to mean something. Meanwhile, I'm the one who changes the light bulbs. I'm the one who drives them to their appointments. My dad interjected then, "All right, that's enough. This is not the place." "No, Dad," I said, sharper than I meant to. "Maybe this is exactly the place because for years I've watched this narrative take shape that I'm the selfish one, the absent one, while Caleb's the hero for sticking around. And I've let it happen. I let it happen because I thought it didn't matter. I thought the truth would win out eventually, but it hasn't." My voice cracked on that last word and I felt my throat tighten. "I didn't disappear," I said, softer now. "I just stopped trying to prove myself to people who had already made up their minds about me." A few of my cousins looked away, uncomfortable. Elise sat still, her face calm but unreadable. My Aunt Karen whispered something to the woman beside her. "I've flown across the country on 2 days' notice because Mom had the flu and needed help. I've helped with house repairs quietly through contractors I hired. I've covered costs you don't even know about because I didn't want anyone to feel embarrassed. But no matter what I do, Caleb gets the hugs and I get the suspicion." My mom finally spoke. "Bryson, honey, that's not fair." "No, what's not fair," I interrupted, "is being treated like a stranger who just shows up to drop money on the table and leave. I love you both. But tonight, I watched as everyone laughed at me, including you, Dad. And I realized I've been giving without being seen. The silence that followed was suffocating. No one moved. No one breathed. Caleb broke it, of course. "So what? You want us to beg for forgiveness? You want a medal? You think just because you paid some bills that makes up for not being around?" I looked at him long and hard. "I think it's interesting that you're so quick to dismiss what I've done. Maybe because if people knew the full picture, you wouldn't be the only one wearing the crown." Caleb's jaw twitched. "You've got no idea what it's like being here every day dealing with their stubbornness. Their moods. You fly in, play savior, and fly out. And you think I don't carry the weight in other ways?" I asked. "You think just because I'm not here physically that it means I don't worry about them? That I don't stay up at night wondering if I've done enough? I've built a life where I can help them, and I have helped them. But all anyone sees is what's convenient." My dad stood then, clearing his throat. "All right, that's enough from both of you." "No," I said more quietly now. "It's not enough because I need to know. When Caleb made that joke during the toast and everyone laughed, including you, did you think it was true?" He paused, looked at me. His mouth opened, closed. And then he said the one thing I didn't expect. "I think it felt true. That broke something in me. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. But something shifted inside like a gear grinding out of place, never to return." I nodded slowly, more to myself than to anyone else. "Right," I said. "Okay, Bryson," my mom said, her voice suddenly gentle. "That's not what he meant." "No, Mom, that's exactly what he meant. And that's okay. At least now I know where I stand." I collected the folder and closed it. Elise stood beside me, placing a hand on my back, and I realized then that I'd been gripping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles were white. "I'll be leaving in the morning," I said. "I didn't want to make this trip about me, but I won't apologize for finally telling the truth." And just like that, I stepped away from the table. My legs were heavy, but my chest was lighter. I walked past my cousins, past the neighbors, past my dad, who didn't meet my eyes. Caleb muttered something I couldn't hear. My mom called my name once, but I didn't stop. We got in the car. Elise buckled her seatbelt without a word. We drove in silence for a while, the sound of gravel crunching beneath the tires. Finally, she reached over, gently took my hand, and said, "You did the right thing." "I don't know," I replied. "I feel like I just lit a match in a dry forest." "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe you finally burned down a lie that needed to go." The next day, I didn't say goodbye. I checked out of the hotel early, left a note at the front desk for my parents. Just a short message. "I'm still your son, but I won't be your scapegoat." And I meant it. But the fallout hadn't even started yet. Because 2 days later, I got a phone call that changed everything. And that's when the real betrayal hit, one I never saw coming. For the first 3 days after I left, the phone didn't ring. No missed calls, no texts, no "where did you go?" or "can we talk?" Not from my mom, not from my dad. Certainly not from Caleb. And I know what you might be thinking. Why would I expect anything different after what happened at the dinner? But the truth is, some small part of me, some rusted childhood part, still hoped that maybe my parents would reach out. Not to apologize necessarily, just to acknowledge me, to say, "We heard you," to ask if I was okay. But they didn't. The first call came from my Aunt Karen. Mid-morning. I was in my apartment back in Chicago, sipping burnt espresso and pretending to answer emails while my mind played reruns of that night on loop. "I just thought you should know," she said, her voice low and weary. "Caleb's been going around saying you threatened the family at the dinner, that you tried to blackmail your parents with money." I blinked. "What?" "He said you brought some folder, waved it around, and said if they didn't start appreciating you, you'd cut them off. That you've been holding money over their heads for years." A few people already believe him. I didn't speak for a moment. My mind couldn't wrap around it. "That's not what happened," I finally said. "I know I was there, but you should know he's getting ahead of the story. And your parents hadn't said a word." Of course they hadn't. "Thanks, Karen," I murmured. She hesitated. "Just be careful. You know how this family works." Oh, I did. I just let myself forget. That call was the beginning of a long, quiet unraveling. Over the next week, I started seeing the ripple effects. My cousin Leah, who used to like every one of my Instagram posts, unfollowed me. A few old family friends stopped responding to texts. One of my mom's neighbors, a woman I'd once paid 6 months' rent for after her husband passed, left a passive-aggressive comment on my business Facebook page about narcissistic sons who think money fixes everything. It hit me harder than I expected. Not because I needed validation from them, but because I'd built this fragile illusion in my head that the truth would eventually speak for itself, that people would see through Caleb's resentment, that my parents would stand up and clarify things. Instead, they stayed silent. And Caleb? He doubled down. I started getting tagged in subtweets from his friends, thinly veiled jabs about family members who abandon their roots, and money guys who think they can buy loyalty. One of his Facebook posts read, "At least I'm not the kind of son who needs to carry around a folder to prove he's worth something." That one got 100 likes. My dad even commented, "Proud of you, son," and that was the real gut punch. I didn't eat much that week. Elise noticed. She cooked dinners I barely touched, sat with me in silence, rubbed my back when I couldn't sleep. She didn't push, just let me feel it. I remember one night I was staring at the ceiling again. That same cold emptiness I'd felt in the hotel was crawling back under my skin. And I said quietly, "What if they were right? What if I really did run off and forget them?" She turned toward me, eyes wide with disbelief. "Bryson, no, you didn't forget them. You made your own life. You built something, and you never stopped showing up for them. They just didn't want to see it unless it looked like what they expected. But maybe I should have just kept paying and stayed quiet." She sat up then. "Let me ask you something. If a friend treated you like this, dismissed your help, laughed at your pain, lied about you, would you still show up for them?" I didn't answer. She reached for my hand. "You're allowed to expect more from the people who say they love you." I nodded slowly, but inside I still felt hollow. The next morning, I woke up to an email from my dad. No subject line, just 4 words. "Let it go, Bryson." That was it. No greeting, no explanation, no acknowledgement of what happened. Just those words. And for a while, I almost listened. I stopped answering calls from extended family. I removed a couple relatives from my company's holiday gifting list. I threw the folder, the one with the medical receipts, into a drawer I didn't plan to open again. I even ghosted Aunt Karen's follow-up message because I didn't know how to respond without sounding bitter. I kept working. That was the one place where things still made sense. My company was launching a new client platform and I poured myself into it. I ran 10 Zoom meetings a day, nodded at every milestone, checked every deliverable box, but it was all mechanical. Like I was playing the part of Bryson the CEO, while the real me waited somewhere behind a locked door. One night, Elise came home with 2 cups of hot chocolate and found me still at my laptop, staring at the same blank slide for 2 hours. "This isn't sustainable," she said softly. I rubbed my eyes. "It's fine. I'm just tired." She sat beside me, handed me a cup. "You're allowed to grieve, you know?" I didn't respond, but something in me cracked. Then I set the laptop aside, leaned into her shoulder, and finally let myself feel everything I'd been avoiding. The anger, the shame, the ache of being misunderstood by the people who raised me. It didn't solve anything, but it was a start. The next morning, I pulled out a notebook and wrote 1 sentence across the top of the page. Who am I outside of them? It sounds dramatic, I know, but I realized that so much of my life, so much of my success, had been quietly driven by a need to prove something, to earn approval, to be seen. And now that I'd hit a wall with my family, I was finally forced to confront the deeper truth. I'd built a life to be impressive, not necessarily fulfilling. So, I started making changes, small ones at first. I restructured my schedule to include time for actual hobbies, not just productive activities. I picked up woodworking again, something I hadn't done since college. I started going on longer walks without my phone. I reached out to an old mentor from my early startup days just to catch up and ended up reconnecting with a few people who reminded me of who I was before I started performing for everyone else. I also launched a passion project that had been sitting in my drafts folder for years, a nonprofit mentoring program for small-town high school students interested in entrepreneurship. I named it after my grandfather, the only man in our family who ever told me I could do anything. Within a few weeks, we had our first cohort of 10 kids. One of them, a 17-year-old girl named Marissa, asked me during a Zoom session, "How did you know you wanted to be successful?" And I said, "Before even thinking, I didn't. I just wanted to be loved." The words hung there for a second, and then I laughed, not bitterly, but with a kind of surprised relief because it was true, and I wasn't ashamed of it anymore. A few weeks later, Elise and I went on a trip to Portland for her friend's wedding. It was rainy, cold, and absolutely beautiful. I left my phone in airplane mode for 3 days. Didn't check emails. Didn't think about Caleb. Didn't even dream about the anniversary dinner. For the first time in what felt like years, I wasn't replaying old wounds. I was just present. I started sleeping better, eating better, laughing more. And somewhere in the middle of that slow rebuild, something interesting happened. I started getting messages, not from Caleb, not from my parents, but from their friends. My dad's old coworker reached out on LinkedIn. "Hey, just wanted to say, heard what you did for your parents. That was incredibly generous. Don't let anyone twist it." A neighbor emailed me to say her husband had recently been diagnosed with the same heart condition, and she wanted to thank me for advocating for better billing transparency. Even a cousin who had been cold to me after the dinner sent a DM. "I'm sorry for judging you. I didn't know the full story. It wasn't a flood, just a trickle. But it was enough to remind me that truth doesn't always echo in the loudest room. It travels quietly, person to person, and eventually lands where it's meant to." Still, I kept my distance. I wasn't ready to go back. Not yet. But then something happened that dragged me right back into the middle of it. Late one night around 11 p.m., I got a text from my mom. Just 1 sentence. "I need to tell you something before it's too late." I stared at it for a long time, and before I could even reply, another message came through. "Your name was removed from the will. Caleb said you told us to go F ourselves. Your father signed the papers last week." I didn't move. I just sat there frozen, the phone glowing in my hand like a fuse that had just been lit. I read the message 3 times, then a 4th. Then I set the phone down on the counter, walked to the sink, and poured myself a glass of water, trying to slow the sudden rush of blood in my ears. The apartment was dark except for the under-cabinet light above the stove. Elise was already asleep in our room, her book resting open on her chest. I just stood there in the kitchen, gripping the counter with one hand, glass in the other, trying to process the fact that my father, my own father, had signed a legal document that erased me from his legacy. Removed from the will because Caleb said I told them to go screw themselves. I hadn't. I would never. But in their silence, in their willingness to be manipulated, the effect was the same. I finally picked up the phone again and replied, "What are you talking about?" No answer. I watched the little typing bubble flicker for a few seconds. Then it disappeared. Then nothing. I didn't sleep that night. I barely moved. My mind was cycling through every emotion it knew. Rage, disbelief, sadness, confusion, and finally landed on a single, sobering clarity. I had spent my whole adult life giving this family the benefit of the doubt, hoping they'd see my worth on their own, hoping the truth would rise through the cracks like sunlight through broken blinds. But people don't see the truth when someone's already handed them a more convenient story. And now they were writing me out of it entirely. I didn't care about the inheritance. Not really. I had my own success. I didn't need my dad's money or property or pension. But it was what it meant, what it said, that after everything I'd done, everything I didn't say, every sacrifice I never paraded, they were willing to cut me out based on a lie. And I knew exactly whose lie it was. The next morning, I called my attorney. "Hey, Patrick," I said, calm but cold. "You remember that family trust review we talked about a few years ago? Of course. You decided not to move forward with it at the time." "Well," I said, "I changed my mind. See, there's something Caleb never understood about me. He thought I was just the guy who threw money at problems and expected applause. But I don't throw anything. I place intentionally, strategically. I build. I map. I invest. And when I play the long game, I win." Back in 2019, during one of my rare visits home, my dad offhandedly mentioned he was worried about his assets. Said something about taxes eating away at the house he'd spent his life paying off. I offered to help naturally, but he waved me off like he always did when anything smelled remotely like financial advice. That was one of our oldest dynamics. He hated feeling like I knew more than him. So instead, I asked around, dug into the local zoning laws, talked to a buddy in property law, and I learned something interesting. Their home, the one Caleb was so eager to inherit, was sitting on a corner lot zoned for small business development. Not particularly exciting, unless you knew the city had just approved a nearby shopping center expansion that would double foot traffic on their street, which meant that the dusty three-bedroom ranch house my dad considered his modest retirement asset was sitting on land that would soon be worth millions to the right buyer. I hadn't said anything at the time. I'd filed it away because, again, I wasn't playing to win back then. I was just trying to be a good son. But now I had a reason to play. I called Patrick and explained the situation briefly without emotion. I told him about the property, the reasoning, the expected value spike. Then I told him about the removal from the will, about Caleb's lies, and what I wanted to do next. "Can we legally contest the amendment to the will?" I asked. "Potentially," he said, "but it depends on the jurisdiction and how it was filed. We'd need to show undue influence, fraud, or mental incapacity." "What about land acquisition?" I asked. "If I wanted to purchase the lot from a future owner, assuming Caleb ends up with it, can I do that privately?" "Sure, but why wait?" he asked. "If the land is going to skyrocket in value, why not find a legal pathway to get it now?" And that's when it clicked. I didn't need to wait. I just needed to get creative. Over the next 6 weeks, I laid the groundwork. Step 1 was simple. I reached out to the city planning office under a different name, technically a shell company I already owned, and requested zoning documents for all properties in that district. I framed it as early research for a potential coffee shop franchise. Nothing suspicious, just due diligence. The documents came back, and sure enough, the city was planning to build a new municipal parking structure 2 blocks from my parents' home. That alone would double the land value. Within a year, any developer with sense would be bidding for the surrounding properties. Step 2. I created a second company, completely unaffiliated with me on paper, and hired a local real estate scout to start making low-level inquiries on nearby lots. This wasn't about buying yet. This was about stirring interest, planting the idea that something big was coming. Developers talk, rumors grow. I needed Caleb to feel the heat. Step 3. I reached out to a trusted appraiser and asked him to quietly value the property based not on the house, but on the lot's potential. The number he came back with made me whistle. Any idea who else has this information? I asked him. Not yet, but it won't be a secret for long. Good. That was the point. Step 4 was personal. I called Aunt Karen. Listen, I said. You were the only one who warned me. I owe you some truth in return. And I told her everything, the medical bills, the folder, the will, the lies. She listened without interrupting. And when I was done, she exhaled so loudly it rattled through the speaker. I knew something was off, she said. Caleb's been acting like he already owns the place. He might think he does, I said. But I'm not done yet. Then I asked her a favor. I didn't want her to lie, just to tell a story. One I knew would make its way back to Caleb, about a mysterious company quietly making offers on all the properties along Chestnut Avenue, and how someone overheard that the land might be worth triple its appraisal soon. She agreed. She even smiled. You've always been more your grandfather than your dad, she said. He would have loved this. Within a month, Caleb reached out for the first time since the dinner. His number lit up my phone while I was sitting in a meeting. I stared at it, let it ring out. He tried again that night. Left a voicemail. Hey, just checking in. Heard some stuff about the neighborhood. Thought maybe you'd know something. I didn't reply. 2 days later, my mom texted. Did you tell someone to make an offer on our house? I ignored it because the truth is I didn't need to do anything else. Caleb was already unraveling. The rumors worked. The market was shifting. And now the property he'd fought so hard to inherit was about to become a liability. Because if he didn't act fast, someone else would. Someone like me. But I wasn't after the land. Not yet. I was after something bigger, something louder. And the perfect opportunity was just around the corner. See, every spring, our family does a reunion picnic at Memorial Park. My mom organizes it. My dad grills. Caleb usually brings the speakers and plays old playlists that haven't been updated since 2012. This year was different. This year I RSVP'd, and I brought the guest of honor, my lawyer. The morning of the family picnic, Memorial Park was already buzzing by the time Elise and I arrived. Kids running between the barbecue pits, coolers cracking open, folding chairs arranged in lopsided semicircles. The same faded James and Darlene family reunion banner fluttered from the same tree it had every year since 2003. It was a scene I knew too well, warm, familiar, and this time completely unaware that the air was carrying something else with it. A storm. Not loud, not fast, but precise. I hadn't been to one of these since before the pandemic. Part of me expected whispers, side eyes, maybe even someone telling me I wasn't welcome after everything that had gone down. But when we walked up, everyone smiled, offered food, nodded politely. Some even hugged me because that's the thing about rumors. They only work until the truth walks in wearing a tailored jacket and mirrored sunglasses. Elise and I sat up near one of the shaded tables, nodding to relatives as we passed. She looked incredible as always, calm, poised, knowing exactly what this day meant to me. And right beside us, in a casual navy button-up and jeans, was someone most of the family had never met before. Patrick Weiss, attorney, strategist, and the quiet engine behind what was about to unfold. "Do we expect fireworks?" he asked me under his breath, watching Caleb lug a cooler across the grass. "No," I said, popping open a soda. "We expect clarity." It didn't take long for the vultures to circle. Within 15 minutes, Caleb had already made a beeline to our table. "Bryson," he said with a tight smile, looking between me and Patrick. "Didn't expect to see you here, especially not with company." "Nice to see you too, Caleb," I said. "This is Patrick. He's here on business." Elise sipped her lemonade and didn't say a word. Caleb raised an eyebrow. "Business at a family picnic?" I figured if everyone's going to keep confusing money with malice, I might as well bring someone who knows the difference. His smile twitched just a little. "So what is this? Some kind of ambush? You're going to pass out spreadsheets again?" I smiled politely. "No need. I'm not here to prove anything to you." Then I stood up and said loudly, "But I am here to clarify a few things." The music kept playing. Kids kept running, but a few heads turned. Aunt Karen definitely heard me. So did Uncle Phil and Cousin Leah. Caleb raised his hands like he was being arrested. Oh boy, here we go again. I ignored him. I'd like to say something, I said louder now. Just real quick. Not a speech, a clarification. That got their attention. My mom looked up from the grill, startled. My dad paused mid-flip of a burger. Elise touched my elbow lightly, signaling I had the floor and the support. Some of you know there's been tension lately, misunderstandings, and that's fine. Families are messy, but I want to be transparent about what's really been going on, especially before things spiral even further. Patrick stepped up beside me, calm and professional. Last year, I said, my brother told my parents I threatened them, that I used my financial help to manipulate them. Based on that lie, I was removed from their will. A few gasped. My mom looked down. My dad stared stone-faced. I didn't find out until after the fact through a text, and I chose to walk away. Caleb was fuming now, red-faced, shifting on his feet. No one wants to hear this. I'm not asking, I said, turning to him. I'm stating, because you spent months poisoning people's opinions of me, and now they deserve the truth. He opened his mouth, but Patrick stepped forward and said, we're happy to provide documentation, including hospital billing records, correspondence, and bank statements proving Mr. Bryson covered over $80,000 of medical debt anonymously and without conditions. He did not, at any point, threaten to withhold support. What he did was step back after being mocked, disrespected, and deliberately cut out of a legacy he helped secure. Silence. You could hear the wind through the trees. But that's not the reason we're here today, I continued. What you all should know is that over the last 6 months, I've been working with the city's planning board, developers, and my legal team to explore a business acquisition project in this area. Now, people were really paying attention. Patrick nodded. We've quietly purchased 3 properties adjacent to James and Darlene's residence through one of Mr. Bryson's companies. Based on public rezoning approvals and upcoming development initiatives, this area is projected to increase in value by 200% over the next 18 months. Murmurs, head swiveling. My mom paled. Caleb blinked. Wait, what? I turned to him. You didn't know? That's surprising. You did spend the last year playing King of the Castle. Patrick pulled out a manila envelope and handed it to Caleb. That's a formal purchase offer for the property. Full cash value, 25% above projected market rate. It's valid for 30 days. Caleb flipped through the packet like it was written in a foreign language. You can't be serious. Oh, I'm dead serious, I said. See, I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for resolution. You wanted the house. You fought for it. Fine, keep it. But now you know what it's really worth. You can sell it and walk away with more money than you ever imagined. Or you can hold on to it, deal with the city, the developers, the permits, the taxes, the offers, the lawsuits, the attention. Your call. His face was red now, sweating, panicked. I don't understand. Why would you do this? I looked him in the eye. Because I want you to understand what it feels like to fight for something, win it, and still lose everything that mattered. A long, quiet beat passed. Then I turned to my parents. I loved you both more than anything, I said. And I still do. But love without respect is just performance. And I'm done performing. My mom looked heartbroken. My dad, stoic as ever, just nodded once. I don't know if it was guilt, regret, or silent acceptance. But I didn't need a scene. I didn't want one. I just wanted to leave on my own terms. Patrick turned to the crowd and added for legal clarity. Mr. Bryson has no intention of contesting the current will. He's not interested in what was taken. He's interested in what he's building. Then we packed up our things. Elise, Patrick, and I walked past the stunned picnic, past Caleb, still clutching the envelope, past the tangled years of misunderstanding, bitterness, and silence. And as we reached the car, I looked back one last time. They were still watching me, but this time they weren't laughing. They were listening, and that was enough. Because sometimes revenge isn't about hurting the people who hurt you. It's about showing them who you've become without them. I didn't need their name in a will to prove I mattered. I just needed to stop waiting for permission to live like I do. Now on to the next story. Story 3. When I was 15, I knew I wasn't a favorite. But I didn't think my own father would one day look me in the eyes and say, "Pack your things, Mason. You don't belong here anymore." I'm 30 now. And yeah, that moment still plays on a loop in my head more often than I care to admit. Let me back up a bit. I'm Mason, and I'm the second son in a family that worshipped the first. My older brother, Zach, is 2 years older than me. Tall, charming, always knew the right thing to say. He could crash my bike, lie about it to my face, and somehow still get praised for telling the truth eventually. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one. I keep my head down, try to be helpful, clean up messes I didn't make, and still get asked why I couldn't be more like Zach. We grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone. And our last name meant something because of the business our family built from the ground up. My grandfather started it. Taylor and Sons Auto, a repair and restoration shop that became kind of legendary around here. Classic Mustangs, 60s Impala, old Harley builds. They passed through our garage like family heirlooms. And yeah, there was pride in that. My dad, Richard Taylor, took it over when Grandpa retired. He ran it like a general. Strict, efficient, no nonsense. But beneath the surface, he was a hard man to please, especially with me. Zach could joke around in the middle of a customer call and get a pat on the back. I'd spend 3 extra hours organizing the tool bay and get told, "Don't waste time on stuff no one sees." By the time I hit my early 20s, it was clear that Zach would inherit the business. And honestly, I was okay with that. I never wanted to be the boss. I liked being behind the scenes, tuning engines, finding parts no one else could track down. I didn't need the spotlight. I just wanted to be part of it. Part of the legacy. Part of something my grandfather built with his bare hands. Something we used to talk about over greasy burgers when I was 10 and thought tightening bolts was the coolest job in the world. But slowly things started to change. It began with the small things. Dad would ask Zach for input during team meetings and completely ignore mine. Even if I was the one who solved the issue the day before, I'd suggest upgrading our inventory system. Zach would laugh it off and Dad would say, "You hear that, Zach? Mason wants to fix what ain't broke." The joke stung more than it should have. I stopped speaking up. Then came the money issues. I wasn't paid as much as Zach. When I asked about it, Dad said it was because Zach was being groomed for leadership. I wasn't. I was just lucky to be there. That one hurt. I let it slide. Told myself maybe they had a plan for me, too. But the real punch to the gut came the year I turned 28. I was living in the apartment above the garage. It wasn't glamorous, but it was free, and I was saving up to buy my own place. Every morning, I'd roll out of bed, grab coffee, and be in the pit before the guys even clocked in. I ran diagnostics, ordered specialty parts, dealt with suppliers from out of state. Stuff Zach never touched. And still, I was invisible until one evening, Dad called a family meeting, which was weird. We never did family meetings. Mom made lasagna. Zach was already grinning like he knew something. And I just had this tight feeling in my gut the whole time. Something was off. We sat around the kitchen table and Dad cleared his throat like he was announcing a will reading. "I've made a decision," he said. "It's time to start transferring ownership." I remember the way Mom kept her eyes down like she couldn't look at me. "I've officially signed over the business to Zach," Dad continued. "Effective next month." I blinked once, twice, tried to process it. Then he said it just casually like it was no big deal. "And Mason, you'll need to vacate the apartment by the end of the month. Zach needs the space." I just stared at him, at all of them, waiting for someone to say it was a joke, for Mom to step in, for Zach to say, "Come on, Dad, that's too much." But no one did. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I didn't even ask why. I just nodded, stood up, and walked out. That was 6 months ago. I packed my things that night, drove away before sunrise, and didn't look back. I found a cheap one-bedroom in the next town over, took a job at a competitor's garage, and started fresh. No one knew my last name there. No one cared who my father was or what my brother inherited. They just saw what I could do. I kept my head down and worked. And then 3 days ago, my phone lit up. It was my dad calling. First time since that night. I stared at the screen, watched it ring, saw the voicemail icon pop up. Later, I listened. His voice was hoarse, almost broken. Mason, please. Something's happened. I need to talk to you. It's about Zach. I didn't call back. Not yet. Because something in his voice told me everything had finally started to unravel. And I wanted to hear every crack as it fell apart. When I didn't call him back, I expected my dad to get angry. That's what he always did when he didn't get his way. Growing up, disappointment wasn't some gentle conversation about how I could do better. It was the cold shoulder, snide remarks. Sometimes even public shaming in front of Zach. But this time he didn't lash out. He called again the next day, left another voicemail. This time he didn't bother hiding the desperation in his voice. Mason, please. I don't know who else to turn to. Just call me back. I made a mistake. I played that one twice. Funny how it takes a mistake to realize who you pushed away. But I wasn't ready to give him anything yet. Not a call, not a visit, not even a text. I needed to sit with it to make sure I wasn't walking back into another storm pretending to be a family dinner. Because here's the truth. The 6 months before that voicemail weren't just healing. They were sobering. I started seeing things I had ignored for too long. Like the time I fixed the shop's hydraulic lift on a Sunday morning alone because Zach forgot to schedule the maintenance. It saved us thousands in repairs. Dad didn't say thanks. Instead, he asked why I hadn't also swept the floor while I was at it. Or the Christmas before that when Zach got a Rolex and I got a $25 gas card and a handshake. Not that I needed the money or the watch, but you notice the imbalance. You remember it, especially when your name isn't even written on the card. But none of that compared to what happened the week after my 29th birthday. I had just gotten back from visiting an out-of-town supplier. Drove 5 hours straight to pick up a rare '69 GTO part we needed for a big-ticket client. Zach was supposed to handle it, but he'd gone off to Tahoe with his girlfriend for the weekend and left me with a scribbled list and zero context. When I dropped the part off at the shop Monday morning, I walked in and found Zach holding court in the office, feet on the desk, sipping his overpriced cold brew like he ran the world. Dad was sitting next to him, laughing at some story I had probably lived through, and he was now retelling like it was his idea. When they saw me, Zach gave a lazy wave. Hey man, you get the part? I held it up, still in the box. Dad clapped once. That's my boy. Always reliable. I almost smiled. Almost, until he added, it's good to have someone like you supporting Zach's leadership. Not everyone's meant to lead, and that's okay. It was like being kicked in the chest. Supporting Zach's leadership, as if I hadn't just driven 10 hours round trip because Zach bailed. As if I hadn't spent every weekend for the past year picking up the slack while he played CEO on Instagram. I went back to the apartment above the garage and started packing that night. Dad called it bad timing. Said I was overreacting. Zach told me I needed a reality check because Dad's just trying to do what's best for the company. So I left. No fight, no tears. I didn't even slam the door. I just quietly walked away from the family that never saw me unless they needed something. That was my breaking point, or so I thought. Fast forward 6 months to the voicemail, the one where Dad sounded like he'd swallowed broken glass. I still hadn't called him back, but curiosity started gnawing at me. Not concern, just curiosity. Because if Dad was calling me for help, something must have gone seriously sideways. So, I did something I hadn't done in months. I drove back into town, didn't go to the shop, just parked across the street from the old diner where mechanics used to grab lunch. It was still there, still had the same cracked sign and the best chili dogs you'd ever eat at 1 a.m. I sat in my car and watched. Around noon, I saw one of the old guys, Pete, walk out with a bag. Pete had been working at Taylor & Sons since before I could drive. Solid guy, liked to call me Little Wrench when I was a kid. I rolled down my window. He spotted me and blinked like he wasn't sure if I was real. Then he smiled. Mason, thought you vanished. Hey Pete, just passing through. He came over to the car, leaned down. You heard then? I frowned. Heard what? He let out a low whistle. Man, your brother's made a mess. My stomach dropped. What kind of mess? Pete looked around like someone might overhear. You didn't hear it from me. Okay? But Zach's been bleeding the business dry. Fancy parties, personal trips charged to the shop, consulting fees for people who don't exist. Couple vendors haven't been paid in months. Customers are pulling their cars. Place is hanging on by a thread. I sat back in my seat, and there it was, the beginning of the unraveling. I thanked Pete and drove off. Didn't go to see my dad. Not yet. But the image stuck with me. The garage, once buzzing with machines and cigarette smoke and country rock. Now quiet. Empty bays. Customers gone. The legacy fading. And for once, I didn't feel guilty. I felt something else. Something closer to clarity. That night, I listened to the third voicemail. The one where my dad finally admitted the truth. Mason, I should have listened to you. I should have seen it. Zach's in trouble. We're all in trouble. The shop, it's not what it used to be. I need your help. I don't know what else to do. He sounded smaller. Not like the man who once barked at me for using the wrong socket size. He sounded tired, worn down. But he wasn't the only one who had changed. Because while the shop was falling apart, I'd been building something new. The garage I joined after leaving, they saw what I could do, promoted me in 3 months. I wasn't running things, but I was making decisions, earning respect, and for the first time in my life, feeling like I belonged. And secretly, I'd started something on the side, a YouTube channel, Wrench and Rust. Just me, working on restoration projects, showing people how to bring old cars back to life. The first few videos barely got 10 views, but then one went semi-viral, a 72 Challenger rebuild with time-lapse and narration. I hit 100K subscribers within 3 months. Brands started reaching out. Sponsors, partnerships. I wasn't rich, but I wasn't invisible either, which made what happened next so much worse because just as I started to feel like I'd moved on, I got a package in the mail. No return address, just my name. Inside was a framed photo of me and my grandfather. I was 10, holding a wrench twice the size of my arm. He had his hand on my shoulder. We were standing in front of the original Taylor and Sons sign. Taped to the back was a note. 5 words, he always believed in you. No signature, no explanation, but I knew who it was from. Only one person had access to that photo. Only one person would use it to tug at a memory I hadn't touched in years. My mom. I hadn't heard from her since I left either. She'd always been complicit, silent. The kind of parent who'd set the table while the argument raged. But she never said a bad word about me. And she loved Grandpa. So that note hit me harder than any voicemail ever could because it made me remember what the garage used to be. Not what it became under Dad and Zach, but what it was when Grandpa ran it. It wasn't about money or image or favoritism. It was about fixing things, restoring what was broken. And now maybe that's what I was being asked to do. Not for Dad, not for Zach, but for the legacy. Still, I wasn't about to run back with open arms. So I made a call. Not to Dad, to someone else. Someone who'd been quietly watching things crumble from the inside. And what she told me, that was the real betrayal. The kind that takes everything you thought you knew about your family and burns it to the ground. The person I called wasn't an old friend or a mechanic or anyone from the business world. It was Melissa. She was the shop's accountant for over a decade and probably the only person who ever treated me with basic respect during the mess that was my final year at Taylor and Sons. Melissa wasn't flashy, didn't talk much, but she saw everything. She kept her head down, did the books, and stayed out of the family politics until now. When I reached out, I didn't even expect her to answer, but she picked up on the second ring. Mason. Her voice was sharp with surprise, maybe even suspicion. Hey, I said, pacing in my apartment, phone to my ear. Sorry for calling out of nowhere. I heard things might be rough back at the shop. There was a pause. Then, with a bitter little laugh, she said, Rough? That's one way to put it. We ended up talking for nearly an hour. She filled in the blanks. After I left, Zach went full golden boy meets CEO. He redesigned the logo, tried to rebrand the entire business as Taylor Performance, wanted to attract a younger, higher-paying demographic. Even though most of our loyal customers were old-school restoration junkies who didn't care about shiny marketing, he fired 2 of the original techs, hired a bunch of influencers to do garage lifestyle shoots on site, pushed a fake sponsorship deal with a tire company that turned out to be a cousin of his girlfriend playing dress-up in Photoshop. Melissa warned my dad repeatedly. He didn't listen. Or maybe he didn't want to admit that the golden boy had turned into a con man in slow motion. But the worst part, the money's gone, Mason, Melissa said quietly. I mean, really gone. I've been digging through the books. He drained the main account, took out a second mortgage on the property. There are liens from unpaid suppliers. If the IRS takes a closer look, they're going to see fraud. I sat down hard. My kitchen chair creaked under me. How the hell did this happen in 6 months? Because you weren't there to stop it. That hit harder than I wanted to admit. She didn't say it like blame, more like fact. Melissa went on. You know what else? He's trying to pin it on you. He told your dad some of the debts were from your last orders, your supplier contacts, leftover unpaid invoices from your era. My mouth actually dropped open. What? He's covering himself, gaslighting your dad, making it sound like you were the problem all along. And that's when something shifted inside me. Not anger, at least not yet. It was something deeper, a sense of finality, like a glass finally shattering after holding a hairline crack for too long. I had walked away from the family business to keep my dignity. But now I realized Zach hadn't just let it burn. He was rewriting the fire. That's what betrayal really is. It's not the theft. It's not the insult. It's the lie they tell about you after you're gone. The next 2 weeks were a blur. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't focus. Not out of regret, but because part of me still cared. Not about Zach, not even about my dad, really, but about what the shop used to be. About what I used to be when I still believed I belonged there. I tried to bury myself in my work. The new garage was busier than ever. And I was managing a team now, 5 guys, 2 lifts, and a 6-month wait list for our custom engine builds. I was in charge of hiring, training, vendor relationships. I'd even started mentoring a kid straight out of trade school who reminded me of myself at 19. Quiet, observant, always asking the right questions. And Wrench and Rust, that little YouTube side project, it exploded. A sponsor reached out, a tool company that saw my rebuild of a 1967 Camaro RS. They offered free gear in exchange for a 2-minute shout-out. Nothing crazy, but it was a start. Then the views snowballed. One video hit 1.2 million. I started getting emails from magazines, car shows, even a documentary team asking if I'd be willing to talk about modern garage culture. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been invisible for years at a shop with my own last name on the building. And now, strangers on the internet wanted to know my story. And still, I didn't tell them. I kept it quiet because this new life, I was building it for me. Not for recognition, not for revenge, just to prove to myself that I wasn't broken. That I never was. Then came the letter. It arrived on a Thursday. Thick envelope, real fancy paper. My name on the front in stiff black ink. Inside was a notice. Legal, formal, cold. Zach was suing me. Allegedly, I had sabotaged company systems prior to departure, leading to lost revenue and client trust. He wanted damages, real ones, 6 figures. I couldn't breathe, not because I believed he'd win, but because I couldn't believe he had the audacity. This wasn't just a smear campaign now. It was war. I called Melissa again. She sounded stunned, but not surprised. He must be desperate, she said. He knows he's circling the drain and he's trying to drag someone else down with him. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. I could have fought it publicly. Could have called every supplier I'd ever worked with. Could have leaked the books. Could have blasted receipts across every platform I had. But something held me back. And that something was my grandfather, because I kept thinking about that photo, about the way he used to talk about integrity. He had this saying, "You don't win by burning the garage. You win by building a better engine." And for the first time in a long time, I finally understood what he meant. Let them burn it. Let them lie. I didn't need to fight fire with fire. I just needed to build something so loud, so undeniable, so true, that the smoke from their collapse couldn't hide it anymore. So I got to work. I expanded the channel, launched a Patreon, exclusive videos, early access, live Q&As, bought new filming gear, partnered with a small custom parts brand that let me design my own limited edition tool roll. And then, without announcing it to anyone, I rented a space. Small but mine. A dusty warehouse with good bones and bad lighting. I called in a few favors, rewired the place, built out 2 bays, painted the walls myself, bought the same tool cabinets my grandfather used, found a rusted-out set on Craigslist, and restored them by hand. Every night I'd work late, alone, headphones in, smell of oil and possibility thick in the air. The world outside could collapse. But in that space, I was becoming again. And I started planning something bigger. Not revenge, not yet. But a project, a rebuild, not of a car, of a legacy, one that would carry the right name this time. My name. And just when I thought I had everything under control, when I finally started to feel like maybe the past couldn't hurt me anymore, I got a message. Not a call, not a letter, a text from my mother. Just 2 words, he knows. And in that moment, every nerve in my body lit up because I didn't know if she meant Zach or Dad. But either way, someone was coming. And this time, I wouldn't be leaving. The message from my mother hit me like a cold gust through an open window. He knows. I must have read it a dozen times. Standing there in the middle of my new shop with grease on my palms, and my playlist looping some dusty Lynyrd Skynyrd track. My mind raced. Who was he? Zach? My father? What did he know? About the channel? About Melissa? About the second garage? I stared at the screen for another minute before typing a response. Knows what? No reply. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. I called. No answer. Then the 3 dots popped up, typing, and vanished. Then again and gone. I just stood there, heart thudding in my ears like it used to when I was a kid and Dad called me downstairs using that tone. That we need to talk tone. Only this time I wasn't a kid anymore. That night I barely slept. Every worst-case scenario played out in my head. Maybe Zach had discovered Melissa talked to me and threatened her job. Maybe Dad had dug into the channel and figured out I'd been profiting off what he still thought was his legacy. Maybe they were planning to sue me again, but louder this time, dragging my name through the mud in front of actual media outlets now that I had some kind of following. But then the more dangerous thought crept in. Maybe he wanted something. Something only I could give. The next morning, I drove out to the old neighborhood. Not to the shop, but the outskirts. A place where cell service dropped and nobody ever checked their mailbox. There's a storage unit there I've kept for years. Originally just for extra tools and some of Grandpa's old stuff after he passed, but lately I'd started storing more strategic things. Boxes of documents, printouts, bank records, even a few video backups I'd quietly made after talking to Melissa. Because part of me always knew this wasn't over. Inside that metal-walled box of dust and nostalgia, I found what I needed. My grandfather's old ledger. Not digital, not online, just paper, pencil, smudged fingerprints, and scribbled dates. It was the original record-keeping book from the first 2 decades of Taylor and Sons, back when he still worked 7 days a week and used nicknames for clients in the margins. It reminded me of who the business was supposed to serve, of what we'd lost when it became about image over integrity. And it reminded me of who I used to be. Not angry, not bitter, just capable. That was the day I started planning. Not just a comeback, a reckoning, but it had to be clean. No public shaming, no YouTube drama, no angry confrontations in front of cameras. That's not who I was. And frankly, Zach would love that. He'd twist it into a pity campaign. Play the victim. So, I needed to be smart, quiet, precise. I called Melissa again. This time, I had questions. And this time, she had answers. First, I asked about ownership. Legally, she said, your father still owns the land the garage sits on. Zach owns the business name, the branding, the inventory, but not the property. I sat with that for a second. So, he's a tenant? Exactly. A tenant who's several months behind on rent. That opened a door. Then I asked about suppliers. Turns out half the people Zach owed money to were the same folks I'd worked with directly back in the day. Guys who still respected me. Some of them hadn't seen a payment since I left. A few were threatening lawsuits of their own. And then I asked about employees. Apparently, Zach had churned through 3 managers in 6 months. Two of them had reached out to Melissa privately, asking if she knew whether I was working elsewhere and if I was hiring. I took a long breath. The cracks were everywhere, and I didn't have to create them. I just had to be there when they broke open. Over the next few weeks, I started reaching out quietly, casually, never through the same platform twice. I called Sam, the welder I used to work with who left 2 months after me. He'd moved downstate to work for a franchise shop, but he hated it. I met up with Tina, the receptionist who ran circles around the whole crew and used to slip me extra printouts when Zach accidentally deleted emails. She'd been fired over some made-up policy violation. She hugged me like I was family when she saw me, and I visited one of our oldest clients, Mr. Hawkins, the classic Ford collector who used to drop off battered beauties for us to bring back from the dead. He was in his late 70s now, still sharp, still driving the Thunderbird we restored together 5 years ago. "I don't go there no more," he told me, sipping coffee on his porch. "They lost my trust, lost the paper trail on my Fairlane, claimed they never quoted me. I didn't say anything, just listened. Whole place feels different now," he said, "like it's got no soul. You ever open up your own place, Mason, you let me know. I'll bring every last car I got." That sealed it. I sat in my office that weekend, lights dim, screens glowing. I looked at the plans I'd sketched on a whiteboard the night I signed the lease to my own garage. Back then, I'd written a single word at the top: legacy. Now I circled it. Then I made some calls. I wasn't just building a repair shop anymore. I was launching a restoration collective, a space for classic builds, custom engine work, liftstream projects, and walk-in repairs, all under one roof. But it wasn't about the money or the flash. It was about building what my grandfather dreamed of. And it was about timing because I knew something Zach didn't. In 2 weeks, the town would host the annual Founders Auto Fair, a car expo, swap meet, and networking event rolled into one. It was the biggest local event of the year. Every vendor, enthusiast, and vintage nut would be there, and Taylor & Sons had been blacklisted, apparently after last year's disaster. A no-show booth and several angry customers demanding refunds. The organizers had had enough. But me, I applied under my new brand, Wrench and Rust Restorations. And I didn't just get in. They gave me center booth placement. I invested nearly every spare dollar I had. I bought signage, printed business cards, built a mobile engine rig so I could do live rebuild demos, partnered with a coffee truck for cross-promotion, even got a drone team to shoot footage for a promo trailer. Melissa agreed to help with logistics, and Tina offered to run the booth with me. It was all lining up, but I wasn't done yet because the final piece was the property. I drove out to see the landlord of the Taylor & Sons building, a quiet guy named Mr. Costa who'd inherited the property from his father. We'd spoken a few times over the years, mostly about rent checks and minor repairs. I brought him coffee, sat down, and asked a simple question. What would it take to buy the lot? He looked at me for a long moment. You serious? Very. He leaned back. Zach's still there. Not for long. Costa drummed his fingers on the table. I've been waiting for someone to take this place seriously. I got other properties now. If you're offering a clean buyout, I'm listening. And just like that, it became possible. I went home that night and ran the numbers. It would be tight. I'd have to cash out some of my savings, maybe delay expansion, maybe take on a small investor. But the idea of owning the land where my grandfather once taught me to change oil for the first time, of reclaiming what was stolen, of building something better right on top of the ashes, that was worth everything. And the best part, they didn't see it coming. Zach was too busy pretending to be a mogul on social media, still posting filtered photos with captions like, CEO mode activated, and hustle never sleeps. And my father, he hadn't called again. Not since that final voicemail, but I had a feeling he would soon because when the expo arrived, when the booths went up and the crowds came pouring in, there'd be one name everyone remembered. Not Taylor & Sons, but the one who never needed the name in the first place. And when that moment came, I wouldn't need revenge. I'd have something better. A stage, a story, and the truth on my side. The morning of the Founders Auto Fair felt like a slow heartbeat. Not racing, not frantic, just steady. I arrived before dawn. The sun hadn't cleared the rooftops yet, and the fairgrounds were still quiet. Vendors setting up tents, hauling in chrome-polished beauties and crate engines like relics. The scent of oil and dust hung in the cool air. And for a moment, it felt like I was 10 again, holding Grandpa's hand, marveling at every Mustang and Chevelle like it was a spaceship. Only now I wasn't a wide-eyed kid in a hoodie. Now I was the main event. Our booth stood right in the center row, bigger than anything I'd ever run. I had banners printed with the Wrench and Rust Restorations logo, a sleek bronze and black design Melissa helped refine. The mobile engine rig was front and center, ready for a live teardown demonstration. Behind it, we had a screen playing time-lapse footage of my recent Camaro rebuild cut together with subtle branding and a story-driven voiceover. And then the real kicker. A side table lined with framed photos of Grandpa, the old shop, and even one of me and Zach when we were kids before the legacy split us. Because this wasn't about erasing the past. It was about showing I remembered everything. Tina arrived at 7:30 sharp with her clipboard and event passes. Melissa showed up 10 minutes later with coffee and a professional smile that hid how deeply personal this was for her, too. I brought in the rest of the crew. Sam, 2 new hires, and the trade school kid I'd been mentoring. We all wore matching shirts. Simple, clean, no names on the back, just one phrase. Built, not given. By 9 a.m., the crowd poured in. And by 9:07, someone stopped by our booth and said the words I'd waited months to hear. "Hey, aren't you the guy from YouTube?" It was chaos in the best way. By noon, we had a constant crowd. People snapping photos, asking about restoration pricing, complimenting the rebuilds and the videos and the brand. I gave interviews to 2 local reporters and one guy with a podcast mic who claimed he had 50,000 subscribers. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I didn't care. I was smiling. And then just before 2 p.m., I saw them. Zach and my father standing 50 feet away. Zach was wearing a tailored black button-down, sunglasses perched on his head like he was starring in a cologne commercial. My father was slower, older-looking than I remembered, stooped, less fire in his walk, like something in him had finally given out. They weren't there to admire the cars. They were there to see me. We locked eyes and I didn't flinch. My dad said something to Zach. Zach shook his head and started toward the booth. My crew froze. Tina looked at me like, "Should we do something?" I just gave a small nod and stepped forward to meet him. "Mason," Zach said, flashing the fake casual smile I knew too well. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Funny," I said, voice calm. "I was thinking the same." He looked around the booth, took in the banner, the crowd, the line of customers watching the live demo. "Nice setup," he said a little too tightly. "Not bad for a backup plan." I smiled. This was the plan. He squinted. "You trying to compete with the family business now? Is that what this is?" I didn't answer right away. Just let that hang in the air. Then I leaned in a little and said quietly, "There's no competition, Zach. Not when one side's already bankrupt." His jaw twitched. "Where'd you hear that?" "I have ears and friends. You know, people you didn't alienate." He glanced around again, trying to keep his voice even. "You know this is low, right? Parading this around like a circus act. Grandstanding." "I'm not grandstanding," I said. "I'm building. The difference is I didn't have to tear down a legacy to do it." His face darkened. "You think Dad's going to let this slide?" I turned slightly and looked toward our demo engine. "I think he doesn't have a choice." And right on cue, like some script written by fate, my dad finally stepped forward. "Mason." His voice was low, rough. I turned to face him. We stood there in the middle of the fair. 2 men who shared a name and blood and not much else. For a second, he just looked at me. Really looked at me, not with disappointment. Not with that tired irritation he wore for years, but like he didn't recognize me at all. I let the silence stretch. Then I said, "You wanted to talk. Now's your chance." He hesitated, then nodded. "Can we talk in private?" I gestured toward the back of the booth behind the curtain. Tina gave me a discreet thumbs up, keeping the crowd entertained. We stepped out of sight. He ran a hand down his face. "I made mistakes," he said. "A lot of them." I stayed quiet. I thought I was doing what was best for the business. Preparing Zach. Giving him the tools. I finally spoke. You didn't give him tools. You gave him a crown and no map. And when he got lost, he burned the kingdom. He winced. He told me you left because you didn't want to work under him. I left, I said slowly, because you told me to pack my things. Because you made it clear I was never going to be anything more than a shadow in his spotlight. His mouth tightened. I regret that. Regret isn't a solution. We stood in silence again. Then he said quietly, he's in over his head. The shop's nearly gone. I can't fix it. I was hoping maybe you could step in, help right the ship. I blinked, then laughed. Just once. You want me to save it? It's your legacy too, he said. Your grandfather built it for both of you. No, I said. Grandpa built it to last. You handed it to a guy who treated it like a toy, and now it's broken. He swallowed. I'm asking for your help, and I'm saying no. His eyes flinched at that, but I wasn't done. I made my own shop, my own team. I don't need to fix what you destroyed. Then I pulled a small envelope from my jacket pocket and handed it to him. What's this? An offer. He opened it. Read the first line. His eyes widened. You want to buy the building? I already made a deal with Costa, I said. You're months behind on rent. He's done with you. He's willing to sell. All I need is a signature from him and your voluntary vacate. His hands trembled slightly as he looked up. You're serious? As a heart attack. He looked like he might argue, then stopped. What happens to Zach? I shrugged. He'll land somewhere. Guys like him always do. Maybe he can run a YouTube channel about how to fake success in 6 months or less. Dad exhaled. You're not even angry. No, I said. I was. But anger fades when you realize you've already won. He nodded slowly. So this is revenge. No, I said. This is freedom. 2 weeks later, the paperwork was finalized. Costa sold me the building for less than it was worth, mostly because he hated dealing with unpaid tenants. Zach's LLC quietly folded. The Taylor Performance Instagram vanished. The sign on the front of the building came down and a new one went up. Same location, same garage doors, but a new name. Wrench and Rust. Legacy Division. We kept the old photos on the wall. Even one of Dad and Grandpa back when they built their first Mustang together. Because I wasn't erasing history. I was honoring the parts that mattered. Word got around fast. Mr. Hawkins brought his Fairlane in the same week. The trade school sent me 2 apprentices. We launched a new series called Legacy Restorations and booked 6 months' worth of builds in a month. As for Zach, last I heard, he was trying to sell a course on garage branding and growth. No one's biting. He texted me once. Congrats, you win. I never responded. And my father? He came by once, stood outside, watched me work, didn't say anything, just nodded, then walked away. It was enough because in the end, I didn't need his words. I had something better. I had peace. And I had a shop full of engines humming in harmony, grease under my nails, and a name on the sign that finally meant something again. Not because someone gave it to me, but because I built it. Now on to the next story. Story 4. I never thought I'd be sharing my own story here. But after what happened recently, I figured this was the place to do it. I need to get this off my chest. My name's Luke, and let me start by saying I wasn't born into money. Everything I have, I built from the ground up. It took years of hard work, sacrifices, and setbacks to get where I am today. I never had a safety net, no rich parents to bail me out if things went south. Just me, a laptop, and an idea that turned into something bigger than I ever imagined. I started my own tech company in my mid-20s. It wasn't some overnight success. I spent years grinding, working 16-hour days, living in a tiny apartment with barely enough to pay rent. There were times I thought about giving up, when it felt like I was throwing everything into a dream that wasn't going to happen. But eventually, the work paid off. One good deal led to another, and before I knew it, my company was taking off. By the time I turned 30, I was officially a millionaire. Not billionaire rich, but comfortable. I could afford a nice house, a luxury car, and vacations whenever I wanted. But even with all that, I never really changed. I still preferred wearing hoodies over suits, still ate at the same local diners, and still kept a small, close circle of friends who knew me before the money. That's when I met her. Let's call her Emily. She was gorgeous, the kind of woman who turned heads when she walked into a room. But more than that, she was charming. The kind of person who made you feel like you were the most interesting person in the world when she talked to you. We met at a charity gala I was invited to. Not my usual scene, but a friend dragged me along. She approached me first, striking up a conversation about my company. At first, I thought she was just genuinely interested, but looking back, I should have noticed the signs. She laughed at all my jokes, even the bad ones. She made sure to casually mention that she wasn't like other women who cared about money. And she moved fast. We went from dating to engaged in under a year. I won't lie, at the time I thought I hit the jackpot. Here was this beautiful, intelligent, fun woman who seemed to love me for me, not just the wealth. My friends warned me to slow down, but I was caught up in it. We got married 6 months ago, and for the first few months, things seemed fine. Sure, there were little red flags. She never really showed interest in my work. Once we were together, she quit her job a month after the wedding, saying she wanted to focus on our life together. She started spending a lot, designer bags, expensive spa days, trips with her friends. When I mentioned maybe slowing down a bit on the spending, she'd get upset, saying, "What's the point of money if we don't enjoy it?" But I brushed it off. I wanted to believe she loved me. I wanted to believe I wasn't just some wallet to her. Then came the day everything changed. It was last Friday. I was supposed to be out of town for a business meeting, a last-minute trip that was meant to take the whole weekend. Emily knew I was gone, so she made plans with her friends. One of her regular girls' nights where they drank expensive drinks and gossiped about people they barely knew. But the meeting got canceled. I decided not to text her right away and just head home. I pulled into the driveway around 8 p.m. The house was quiet, but as I walked inside, I heard voices coming from the living room. At first, I thought she had some of her friends over, but as I got closer, I realized she was on the phone. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the second I heard my name, I stopped in my tracks. I'll never forget what I heard next. Emily let out this laugh, one of those fake, high-pitched laughs she always used when she was showing off, and then she said, "Oh, please, Luke's just a temporary fix. Once I have his money, I'm gone." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. She kept talking, completely unaware I was standing just a few feet away. "No, seriously, you really think I'd stay with him if he wasn't rich? He's not my type at all. But hey, might as well enjoy the ride while it lasts, right?" Her friend laughed on the other end. Then Emily said something that made my stomach drop even further. "I give it a year, maybe less. By then I'll have enough saved up to make a clean break. And let's be real, divorce means I'll be set for life." I just stood there, frozen. My own wife, the woman I thought I'd spend my life with, was openly admitting she was using me. That she never loved me, that I was nothing more than a bank account to her. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, my hand shaking, and hit record because if she thought she was about to play me, she had another thing coming. I stood there for a moment, staring at my phone as Emily's words echoed in my head. She was planning to take me for all I was worth, and I couldn't believe I'd been blind to it for so long. It hurt, but more than that, it made me angry. So angry that my fingers nearly shook as I slipped my phone into my pocket. But I wasn't going to let her see that. No, I couldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. Not when I'd finally figured out what kind of person she really was. I took a deep breath, pushed my emotions aside, and walked back into the living room. Emily and her friends were still chatting, a little more quietly than before, but the moment I entered, the conversation paused. They all turned their heads toward me with a mix of smiles and slightly nervous glances. Emily's smile was the widest, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hey, babe," she said, trying to sound casual. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I replied, keeping my voice level. "Just needed to grab something from the office." I looked around at the group, offering a polite smile. "I'll be upstairs if you need me." Emily nodded, her smile still glued on her face. "Okay, I'll be up to join you later," she said. But I didn't miss the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. I ignored the unsettling feeling creeping in and gave a nonchalant wave before heading upstairs to my study. I tried to tell myself that I needed to stay calm, that I shouldn't rush anything, but I couldn't help it. The tension was unbearable. Once inside, I leaned against the desk, breathing deeply and collecting my thoughts. I still had Emily's conversation fresh in my mind, but the weight of what I just learned was making it hard to focus. I needed to act, but not out of impulse. I had to be careful with my next steps, so I pulled out my phone and scrolled to my lawyer's contact. I've been through enough legal matters to know that when you're dealing with something this serious, it's better to act quickly and with precision. I needed my lawyer's advice to make sure I did everything by the book. I hit the send button, firing off a quick message. "We need to talk. Get back to me as soon as possible. I'm available tonight." Then I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen, waiting for the reply. Minutes passed and then an hour. I checked the time again. Still nothing. I felt the itch of impatience start to creep in. How long did it take to read a text and send a response? I glanced at the screen again. Nothing. I had a gut feeling my lawyer was busy, but I didn't like waiting, especially not with the weight of this situation hanging over my head. It was another half hour before I heard the ping of a new message. My heart skipped a beat as I checked my phone. It wasn't the response I was hoping for. The message came from my lawyer's office, not my lawyer himself. It said, "Sorry for the delay. Look, your lawyer will be able to meet with you first thing tomorrow morning. We'll review your case then." Tomorrow morning. I let out a frustrated sigh, but there was nothing I could do to change it. The waiting was killing me, but I had to respect the process. I couldn't rush things, especially not when I was so close to everything I needed to secure. I put the phone down and took another deep breath. Emily would still be downstairs, oblivious to the storm that was about to hit. I wasn't about to give away my next move just yet. She had no idea how much I knew now, and I was going to let her enjoy her little game for just a little bit longer. I spent the next few hours in my study, scrolling through legal documents, reviewing the prenup we'd signed years ago. That had been my biggest safeguard all along, and now it was going to be the key to shutting down her plans. If there was anything I'd learned from building my wealth, it was that you always protect your assets first, whether that meant investments, property, or apparently marriage. The time passed slowly, and I could hear Emily's footsteps upstairs as she walked in and out of the room, preparing to get ready for bed. Her friends had left by then, so I figured she would try to come check on me soon. I heard a knock at the door. "Luke." It was her voice again, soft, careful. "Can we talk?" I didn't jump at the chance to open the door immediately. Instead, I took a moment, sitting back in my chair and composing myself before I finally stood up and walked toward the door. I opened it, not giving anything away. I had to play this right. "Hey," I greeted her coolly, keeping my expression as neutral as possible. "What's up?" She stood there in the doorway, wearing one of my old shirts, her hair still damp from the shower. I noticed her eyes were slightly red. "I just thought we could relax tonight. Maybe catch up on some shows or something. I feel like we haven't had any time together lately," she said, her voice soft, almost pleading. I looked her over, trying not to show any emotion. "Sure, sounds good. But I've got a lot of work I need to finish." "Rain check." Her smile faltered for just a second, but she recovered quickly. "Of course. I just wanted to make sure everything was okay. You've been acting a little distant lately." I nodded, giving her a tight smile. "I'm fine, just been busy. I'll be downstairs soon." She nodded slowly, clearly wanting to say more but didn't. Instead, she gave me a soft, forced smile before turning and walking back down the hallway. I didn't move for a moment, just staring at the closed door. My chest tightened. A mix of anger, frustration, and something else I couldn't quite name. It was hard to look at her and still see the woman I had married. But that was the game now, wasn't it? She was playing me for a fool, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Tomorrow things would change, but tonight I had to wait. The next morning felt like it took forever to arrive. I had barely slept, tossing and turning as I thought about what I'd overheard the night before. I couldn't get the image of Emily's smirk out of my mind. How confident she had been, how she thought she had me all figured out. That was the part that stuck with me. She didn't know I'd figured her out. By the time the sun was up, I was pacing around my study, reviewing everything in my mind again. The prenup, the lawyer, the steps I had to take to make sure everything went smoothly. I wasn't going to give Emily a chance to ruin me. She wouldn't even see it coming. I grabbed a quick breakfast, trying to push the nerves away, but they were still there, fluttering in my stomach. The last thing I wanted was to go through with this. Divorce was messy no matter how justified you were, but this was different. She had crossed a line. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into giving her everything. When I finally arrived at the lawyer's office, I was greeted by my attorney's assistant, a friendly but no-nonsense woman who quickly ushered me into the meeting room. My lawyer, Mark, was already there, flipping through a stack of papers. "Luke, good to see you again. Thanks for coming in on short notice. I know this isn't the easiest situation." Mark offered me a handshake before sitting down across from me. I sat down too, leaning forward. "You have no idea. I need your help with something important." Mark's eyes narrowed in concern as he folded his hands. "What's going on?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. It felt strange, even after everything that had happened, to talk about my personal life in front of someone else, but I had no choice. "My wife, Emily, I think she's been planning to leave me once she gets everything she wants. She's been talking about taking me for my money, and I overheard her saying she's only with me for the financial gain." Mark raised an eyebrow, his expression shifting to one of caution. "That's a serious accusation, Luke. Do you have anything to back this up?" I hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. I recorded part of the conversation. She was talking to one of her friends about how she's going to get everything from me when the time comes. She thought I wasn't around. Mark leaned back in his chair, nodding slowly. "I understand. I'll take a look at the recording in a minute, but let's talk about the specifics. You mentioned a prenup earlier. Do you have it with you?" I reached into my bag and handed over the prenup papers, feeling a sense of relief that everything was already in place. The prenup had been something I'd insisted on, even when Emily wasn't happy about it. She had called me paranoid at the time. I guess she was right to think I was paranoid, except I wasn't paranoid about her cheating. I was paranoid about her greed. Mark skimmed over the prenup, nodding as he read through it. "This is solid. You're protected. If what you say is true, she's not going to get any of your assets, and she might even owe you in the end. But the situation is delicate. We'll have to proceed carefully." I could feel my stomach tighten. This was real now. It wasn't just a feeling anymore. I had the evidence, I had the legal protection, I had the strength to do what needed to be done, but it still didn't make it any easier. After a few more minutes of talking strategy, Mark handed me a set of divorce papers. "These are ready to go. You can serve them at any time, but I suggest waiting for the right moment. If you want to catch her off guard and ensure she doesn't make a scene, you'll need to do this at the right time." I took the papers from him, feeling the weight of them in my hands. It was like holding a ticket to a new life, one that didn't involve manipulation or deceit. It was the moment of truth. "I'll give her the papers when the time is right," I said quietly, making sure my voice didn't waver. "But I need to make sure everything is in place first. I don't want her to get away with anything." Mark gave me a reassuring smile. "You've got everything you need. Just make sure you stay calm and collected when you serve the papers. It's going to be emotional, but you're in control." I nodded, standing up. "Thanks, Mark. I appreciate all your help." "No problem, Luke. Keep me posted if anything changes. We'll make sure this is as clean as possible." I left the office, the papers safely tucked in my bag. My mind raced as I drove back home. I couldn't believe this was really happening. I was about to confront Emily, about to end a chapter of my life that I'd never imagined I'd be ending. But I had to do it. I had to stand my ground. When I got home, the house was eerily quiet. Emily's car was in the driveway, but I didn't hear any sounds coming from inside. I took a moment to compose myself before walking in, making sure my expression was calm and neutral. I could hear her moving around upstairs, probably getting ready for the day. I paused for a second, then walked into the living room. I took a deep breath and sat on the couch, tapping my fingers on the armrest as I waited. My heart was racing, but I kept telling myself to stay calm. This was it, the moment I had been preparing for, the moment when I would stop pretending, stop playing her game. A few minutes passed before Emily came down the stairs, her usual bright smile on her face. "Hey, babe. Good morning. How'd your meeting go?" I looked at her, my heart pounding, but I didn't let her see it. I gave her a small smile, the kind that didn't reach my eyes. "It went fine. I need to talk to you about something, though." Her expression faltered for just a second, but she quickly recovered. "Of course, what's up?" I reached into my bag and pulled out the divorce papers, sliding them across the coffee table toward her. "I know what you've been planning, Emily. I overheard everything. The games are over." Her smile disappeared as she stared at the papers in front of her. For a moment, there was silence, thick and suffocating. She reached for the paper slowly, her fingers trembling just slightly. I leaned back, watching her carefully, my mind already racing through what would come next. The ball was in her court now, but I didn't think she was prepared for this. Not at all. She stared at the divorce papers for what felt like an eternity, her eyes flickering between the papers and me, a mix of disbelief and confusion flashing in her expression. It was as if she couldn't quite process what was happening. Finally, her hand shot out to grab the papers, her fingers trembling as she picked them up, glancing at the top. The color drained from her face when she saw the heading, "Petition for Divorce." "What is this?" she asked, her voice coming out shaky, though she quickly tried to mask it with an irritated tone. "Look, this isn't funny. You're being ridiculous." I didn't respond, letting her squirm. She needed to fully process this. She needed to see the reality of what I had done. She flipped through the papers, her face flushing as she saw the terms. Her eyes widened when she reached the part about the prenup, where it was clearly stated that I was entitled to the majority of our shared assets due to her breach of trust. She stood up abruptly, pacing the room as she clutched the papers in her hands. Her voice began to rise, shaky at first, but gaining strength with every word. "You can't be serious, Luke. This is insane. We've been together for 4 years. You can't just throw everything away like this." "I'm not throwing anything away," I said calmly, standing up and crossing my arms. "But you've been planning this for a while, haven't you? Using me, pretending to be someone you're not, all while you worked your way into my life, my bank account, and now you think you're entitled to everything I've worked for." She opened her mouth to speak, but then she closed it again, her hands fidgeting with the edge of the papers. She was panicking now, and I could see her mind scrambling for some excuse or way to explain her actions. "No," she said after a long pause, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're making a mistake, Luke. I wasn't using you. I love you. I've always loved you, please." Her voice cracked slightly as she took a step toward me, her expression pleading. "Please, let's talk about this. We can work things out. I swear, I was just stressed. This isn't what I meant." I wasn't moved. The pleading, the change in tone, this was the exact manipulation I'd been expecting, the exact kind of thing I had known would happen once I called her out. She had no idea that I wasn't just some naive fool. I'd seen it all before in her eyes the night I overheard her. "I'm not interested in hearing your excuses, Emily," I said flatly. "I heard what you said to your friends. You thought I wasn't listening, thought you could play me. Well, you were wrong. I've known for a while, and this," I motioned to the papers, "this is the result." Her face twisted in confusion, then anger, as she stomped her foot in frustration. "You think I'm some gold digger?" Her voice broke as she shouted. "You think I'm just using you for your money? How dare you?" I remained calm, watching her rage as she circled the living room. This was the part where she tried to turn the tables, where she tried to make me feel guilty or question my decision, but I wasn't going to fall for it. "Do you remember that conversation you had last night when I wasn't home?" I asked, finally breaking my silence. Her face immediately paled. What are you talking about?" I leaned forward, watching her carefully. "The one where you told your friend that once you got my money you'd leave me. How I was just a stepping stone to you, and once the wedding was paid for, you'd be done with me." Her eyes widened, her lips trembling as she took a step back. She looked like a deer caught in headlights, her earlier bravado evaporating in an instant. You were listening? You were spying on me? Her voice rose in disbelief. I wasn't spying on you, Emily, I replied, my tone cold now. I just wasn't as oblivious as you thought I was. And unlike you, I don't make decisions based on lies. She stood frozen for a moment, as if trying to process everything. Then, in a desperate attempt to save face, she tried to laugh it off, but it sounded hollow and forced. Oh, come on, Luke. This is ridiculous. You know I was just joking around, right? It was nothing serious. You can't just throw our whole relationship away over a stupid conversation. You've been overreacting to everything. I didn't laugh, I didn't flinch. I wasn't going to let her deflect anymore. You're right about one thing, you were joking around. But the joke's on you. You really thought you could manipulate me and get away with it, didn't you? But I'm not the one who's going to walk away from this with nothing. Her face twisted in frustration as she took a few steps toward me, suddenly putting on a false smile. Luke, please. I can't lose you. We've built so much together, you can't just walk away from everything we've created. Please, let's not do this. I finally stood up, my eyes narrowing. You had your chance, Emily. This is over. Her expression shifted to something colder, more calculated, as she realized what I meant. You think this is over? You really think I'm just going to let you keep everything? You have no idea who you're dealing with, Luke. You signed that prenup, yes, but you think I don't know how to fight back? You think I won't take you to the cleaners in this divorce? She smirked, as if she had won already. I'll get my money one way or another. Don't think I won't. I just smiled, feeling a sense of satisfaction build up inside me. That's where you're wrong. You won't get a cent from me. Not a penny more than what you deserve. I reached into my bag and pulled out the prenup papers. I know the terms better than you do, and I'm not going to back down. The moment her eyes scanned the document, her smirk faded, replaced by panic. She took a few steps back, her mind racing as the reality of what was happening hit her like a ton of bricks. You think I can't find a way around this? She spat, her voice cracking now with anger. You think I'm just going to let you win? I shook my head. I don't need to win, Emily. I just need to make sure you don't get away with it. With that, I turned and walked out of the room, not giving her a chance to respond. I could hear her shouting behind me, but I didn't care. The worst was over. I had everything in place. She wasn't going to get away with it. She had already lost. It's been a few months since that day, and honestly, it's surreal to look back at it all. The whole process took a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of emotional strain, but I knew I was doing the right thing. The day I handed Emily those divorce papers, everything shifted. I wasn't just walking away from a failed marriage. I was walking away from a manipulation I had been blind to for far too long. The divorce itself was a bit of a mess, as expected. Emily fought tooth and nail, trying to get as much money as possible out of me using every trick in the book, but the prenup was airtight. She couldn't touch anything I had worked for. It didn't stop her from trying, though. The drama was endless. Phone calls, emails, late-night texts begging me to reconsider, threats of ruining my reputation, and even her lawyer making some baseless accusations. But I had prepared myself for all of that. I didn't buckle under the pressure. Eventually, Emily realized she was getting nowhere. The court granted the divorce in my favor. I got to keep everything that mattered to me. My house, my business, my assets, and she got her freedom. But it wasn't quite the fairy tale she expected. I found out later that she tried to spin the narrative to her friends and family, claiming that I was the one who didn't care, that I was cold and controlling, but none of them believed her for long. My close friends knew what happened, and the people who knew her best could see right through her. There were no tears of sympathy from anyone. Everyone just kind of moved on. I can't say I was surprised. I'd heard those same friends laugh about how she was just waiting for the right time to get out while pretending to be the perfect wife. As for her, well, I don't think she's fully recovered. There were rumors about her bouncing from one guy to another, trying to latch onto a new target, but I honestly don't keep track of her anymore. She's not my problem. Every so often I hear from her mom, who still occasionally reaches out, wondering if I'll take her back or give her a second chance, but I never respond. The truth is, I'm happier now than I've ever been. I finally have the peace I always wanted. I've been living my best life. I've had more time to focus on my business and travel the world, checking off things from my bucket list that I'd put off for far too long. I've met new people, real friends, people who actually care about me, not what I can offer them. I've even started dating again, but this time I'm smarter about it. No more pretending. I'm not settling for anyone who thinks they can take advantage of me. And the best part, I don't have to worry about anyone pretending to love me for my money anymore. I can finally relax and enjoy my life without the constant weight of manipulation hanging over me. It's amazing how much lighter life feels without that toxic cloud following me around. I'm not angry anymore either. I'm just grateful that I saw through the lies before it was too late, grateful that I had the strength to walk away. The moral of the story: never let anyone take advantage of you, no matter how good they make you think they are. You'll always be worth more than their manipulative schemes, and if you ever find yourself in a similar situation, don't be afraid to take control of your life. Trust your instincts, get out before it's too late, and remember, you deserve better. I'll be just fine, and I'm living proof that sometimes things really do get better after you walk away from the toxic people who try to bring you down. Now on to the next story. Story 5. The morning of my wedding, my dad texted, "We're not coming." That afternoon, my uncle posted a photo. My whole family on a boat in Santorini. Caption: "Finally free of the drama." I texted back, "Perfect timing." That night, I removed myself from the business charter and blocked all corporate accounts. 7 days later, my dad showed up outside my condo, banging on the door. I opened it, took a sip and said, I couldn't believe what I was reading. How was it even possible? My dad's name sat at the top of my phone screen and, underneath it, 3 words, "We're not coming." It didn't register right away. My first thought wasn't anger or sadness. It was confusion. There had to be more to the message. Something cut off, maybe even a follow-up already on the way. But when I tapped the notification, that was it. Just those 3 words. No punctuation, no explanation. I stood there in front of the mirror, tie half done, the weight of the phone in my hands suddenly heavier. My best friend and groomsman, Caleb, was across the room joking about how stiff I looked, but I barely heard him. I just kept staring at that text, my brain cycling through possible scenarios. Maybe their flight had been canceled. Maybe there was a medical emergency. Maybe the car broke down on the way to the airport. I even considered whether my dad's phone had been hacked. All of those options flickered through my mind in seconds, and all of them felt wrong because deep down I knew this wasn't out of character for them. It was the kind of blunt, dismissive move my family specialized in. Growing up, I'd gotten used to birthdays forgotten, milestones ignored, even big wins at work brushed off with half smiles and subject changes. But still, on my wedding day, I didn't respond right away. I think I was holding out hope that another message would land, something to explain this away. And then I made the mistake of opening Instagram. The very first thing at the top of my feed was a fresh post from my Uncle Rob. The kind of picture you almost expect to see in a travel brochure. A gleaming white yacht anchored off the coast of Santorini. Sunlight hitting the water so hard it looked unreal. And there they all were. My dad standing right at the bow with a glass of champagne, wearing sunglasses like he was in a music video. My mom next to him in a wide-brimmed hat, laughing. My sisters in matching sundresses, hair blowing in the breeze. A couple of cousins on deck holding up bottles. Every single one of them beaming. Not a trace of guilt in sight. And the caption. The caption was what froze me in place. Finally free of the drama. That was it. No context, no tags. Just a public declaration that they were glad to be anywhere but with me. I stared at that post for a solid minute before I realized my jaw was clenched so tight it hurt. There was no emergency, no canceled flights, no reason they couldn't be here. They had simply chosen to celebrate my absence. My wedding was just an inconvenience they neatly sidestepped. Outside, I could hear the faint hum of guests arriving. the photographer corralling people for pre-ceremony pictures. Caleb knocked on the door and asked if I was ready, but I didn't answer. My mind was already racing, not just with hurt, but with something sharper. I put my phone away and walked out, smiling for photos, greeting relatives from my fiancé's side, shaking hands, laughing when appropriate. No one would have guessed that only an hour before I had been staring at proof that my entire family had cut me out in the most public way possible. They thought they were free of my drama. What they didn't know was that the real drama hadn't even started yet. The ceremony passed in a haze. I heard my own voice saying the vows, felt the pressure of the ring sliding onto my finger, caught flashes of smiles from friends and my fiancé's family. But the whole time it was like my mind was split in two. One part of me was here in front of everyone and the other part was thousands of miles away staring at that yacht in Santorini. I could see it over and over in my head. The polished deck, the ridiculous champagne flutes, my father's sunglasses catching the sun, that smug little curve of his mouth. It wasn't just them skipping my wedding. It was the message behind it. That caption, finally free of the drama, wasn't casual. It was the kind of thing you post when you want people to know exactly who you're talking about without saying their name. They had turned my wedding day into a celebration of their absence. The worst part, this wasn't new. My family had a long tradition of making sure I knew where I stood, somewhere between useful and expendable. Birthdays were often forgotten. When I graduated college, they sent a text. No phone call, no dinner. The only times I got their full attention were when the family business needed something. I told myself it didn't matter, that I didn't need them to be proud of me. But standing there on my wedding day, watching guests take their seats while my entire bloodline sipped champagne in Greece, that illusion cracked. By the time we made it to the reception, the hurt had shifted into something sharper. I knew exactly where my leverage was. They had spent years assuming I'd always be part of the charter company. My grandfather's old business, expanded by my father, but in reality kept alive by me. I was the one securing contracts, smoothing over client issues, keeping schedules tight. My dad liked to play the role of visionary, but everyone in the industry knew the day-to-day lived and died with me. And I knew more than just operations. I knew the passwords. I knew the vendor lists, the private accounts, the clients whose loyalty wasn't to the family name, but to me personally. I knew which accounts had standing credit lines, which contracts had loopholes, which insurance policies could stall operations if flagged for review. I knew every weak point because I was the one who made sure no one else could exploit them. So, while the music played and the toasts went on, I was doing math in my head, not financial math, strategic math. How many steps it would take to pull my name, my hands, my influence out of their empire without giving them time to replace me. How quickly I could lock down accounts before my father even realized what was happening. The opportunity was almost too perfect. They had given me the cleanest exit imaginable, a public declaration that they didn't want me in their lives. Well, I could give them exactly that. Around 10:45 p.m., after the cake had been cut and the dance floor had started thinning out, I slipped upstairs to the private room the venue had given us for storage. Inside my bag was my laptop. My fingers were steady as I logged into the company systems. The first thing I did was transfer my shares out of the family trust. No warning, no meeting, just gone. The second thing, and this one made me smile, was freezing all corporate credit cards. The bank's fraud department would be on the phone with my father by morning asking about suspicious activity. He wouldn't be able to explain. Then came the vendor accounts. I locked down our largest fuel supplier and our maintenance contractor. Without those two, our fleet wouldn't move for long. I flagged 3 of our highest value client accounts for irregularities, which meant they'd be frozen until a compliance officer reviewed them. I also pulled my access credentials from the master list, ensuring no one could reverse my changes without jumping through a week's worth of bureaucratic hoops. Lastly, I wrote my resignation. It wasn't emotional, just 2 short sentences making it clear I was leaving effective immediately, and that all inquiries about operations should be directed elsewhere. By midnight, the company was essentially paralyzed. The phones could still ring, but nothing would move forward without me. And now I was gone. I closed the laptop, put it back in my bag, and went downstairs. I didn't miss a beat. I laughed. I danced. I clinked glasses with friends. To everyone else, I was just a groom riding the high of the best day of his life. But in my head, I was already picturing my father's face when he found out what I'd done. And I knew this was only the beginning. The morning after the wedding, I woke up before my wife. The room was still dim, the kind of quiet you only get in a hotel when everyone else is sleeping off the night before. I slipped out of bed and made my way down to the breakfast buffet, figuring I could grab a plate of something greasy and strong coffee to keep my head clear. I barely poured the coffee before my phone lit up on the table. First, it was the office landline. I let it ring out. Then, it was my dad's assistant, a woman who usually only called me when she needed me to smooth over a client complaint. I let that go, too. Then came the senior captain, the one who'd been with us since my grandfather ran the company. 3 calls in a row, all ignored. By the time I was halfway through my omelet, the calls had turned into emails, urgent accounts frozen, vendor threatening to pull contract, need your access codes ASAP. The wording was polite enough, but I could feel the panic bleeding through the screen. I didn't bother opening them. I closed my laptop, finished my coffee, and went back upstairs like nothing had happened. Day 2, my father finally reached out. No congratulations, no small talk, just 4 words that might as well have been barked in person. What did you do? I didn't respond. Not out of pettiness, but because there was nothing to say. Day 3, the calls spread beyond the business. Friends, old colleagues, even a distant cousin messaged me saying my father had been blowing up their phones. One guy told me he'd seen my dad at the marina, pacing up and down the dock while yelling into his phone at a bank rep. Apparently, he went on so long and so loud they asked him to leave the property. By day 4, I blocked half the numbers in my contacts list. Day 5 brought a text from my uncle, the same uncle who had posted that yacht photo. Just one sentence. This is getting out of hand. Call him. I didn't reply. Day 6 was the first day of complete silence. No calls, no texts, no emails, which was worse because I knew that meant something was building. My father wasn't the type to just give up. On day 7, the buildup finally hit. It was just after sunset. I was home in my condo, sitting on the couch with a mug of coffee, the city lights flickering through the windows. The pounding on the door came out of nowhere. Loud, sharp, relentless. Whoever it was wasn't knocking to be polite. They were here to be heard. I didn't need to guess who it was. I opened the door and there he stood. My father. His hair was messy, his face red, his eyes bright. That way people's eyes get when they've been holding in too much anger for too long. He was breathing heavy, like he'd come straight from an argument. The shouting started immediately. Something about betrayal, about family, about how I had no right to do what I'd done. His voice filled the hallway, bouncing off the walls, drawing a couple of curious looks from neighbors. I let him go on until he ran out of words. Then I took a slow sip from my coffee, stepped aside just enough and said, "Perfect timing." I didn't invite him in. I didn't close the door either. I just left that thin space open between us, letting him decide if he wanted to walk through or turn around and leave for good. Either way, I already knew which choice I was hoping for. He didn't knock again, just shoved past me into the condo like it was still his right to be here. I closed the door behind him, slow and deliberate, not because I was afraid, but because I wanted him to feel the weight of the quiet. He stood in the middle of my living room, scanning the space with that look people get when they're searching for the thing they want to attack first. His chest was still heaving from the shouting in the hallway. "You think this is some kind of joke?" His voice was lower than outside, but sharper. "You've humiliated the family. Do you have any idea what this has done? The marina is calling me nonstop. The bank has locked 3 major accounts. We've got vendors threatening lawsuits. Clients are pulling bookings. Do you even understand the scale of what you've done?" I leaned against the kitchen counter, set my coffee down, and met his stare without blinking. "Sounds like you had a busy week." That threw him for a second. Just a flicker, the tiniest break in his expression. He was used to me defending myself, explaining, rushing to fix things. I gave him nothing. He recovered quickly, moving to threats. "You're going to undo this tonight. I'll have the lawyers on you by morning if you don't." I couldn't help the small smile that pulled at my mouth. Dad, you don't have lawyers. You have Dennis. Dennis handles traffic tickets and once got you out of paying for a fender bender because the other guy didn't show up in court. You think Dennis can handle this? His jaw twitched. I walked past him to the cabinet, opened the door, and pulled out a thick black binder. It landed on the table with a heavy thud. This, I said, is everything. He didn't move, so I flipped it open for him. Contracts with missing signatures, payment records showing unexplained withdrawals, emails where I'd warned him that taking money from the maintenance budget would ruin operations, photos of invoices for parts that were never ordered, even a scanned copy of a letter from a client threatening to pull their entire fleet because of safety concerns. I closed the binder and slid it toward him. If you want to bring in lawyers, I'll make sure they get the full version. Maybe the IRS would be interested too. Or your insurance carrier, or our biggest client. The one who doesn't know their payments are financing your vacations in Greece. The silence stretched for a moment. He wasn't my father. He was just another man cornered, calculating which exit wouldn't cost him everything. His shoulders dipped slightly, but then he forced them back up. You're still my son, he said finally, like that was supposed to mean something. You think you can just cut ties, but you can't. You'll come back. You always do. I shook my head. Not this time. That's when he reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. He slid it across the table toward me. Inside was a check with my name on it. The amount wasn't just generous. It was the kind of figure that was meant to erase history. Enough to buy me a new life somewhere else. Enough to make most people forget about principles. You walk away, he said, and this stays between us. You take the money and nobody ever sees what's in that binder. I looked at the check for a long time. Not because I was tempted, but because I wanted him to think I was. Then I slid it back across the table, never breaking eye contact. That was the moment it hit him. The leverage he thought he had over me was gone. The person he was talking to wasn't the son who used to beg for approval. I was someone who didn't need his money, his business, or his name. And for the first time since I'd known him, I saw fear in his eyes. 2 days after my father walked out of my condo, the final act began. The first call came from my cousin Jenna. We hadn't spoken in years, but she didn't bother with pleasantries. Your dad's telling everyone you destroyed the company, she said flatly. He's saying you froze accounts out of spite and that you stole money on your way out. I almost laughed, but I knew how dangerous his version of events could be. My father had spent his whole life perfecting the art of rewriting history, bending the truth until people couldn't remember what was real. And he was good at picking his audience, the type of people who'd rather cling to a simple lie than deal with a complicated truth. But this time, in trying to smear me, he made a fatal mistake. He'd drawn the wrong kind of attention. By the next morning, one of our largest clients, a luxury travel company with contracts worth millions, released a public statement. They were terminating their agreement with our charter business and pursuing legal action for breach of contract and misappropriated funds. Those words weren't mine. They came directly from the documents I'd been keeping for years. The same binder I'd laid in front of my father. Apparently, one of my quiet allies in the company had decided it was time the truth came out. Then came the second blow. A journalist who had covered the maritime industry for decades published a piece outlining years of systemic safety violations and inconsistent maintenance reports tied to our fleet. They didn't name my father directly, but they didn't need to. Anyone in the business knew exactly who they were talking about. By day 3, the call I'd been waiting for arrived. Not for me, but for him. The IRS had opened a formal investigation into the company's finances, and they weren't the only ones. 2 separate insurance carriers froze coverage pending a review, which meant our boats couldn't legally leave the dock. It was over completely. Within 72 hours, the charter company was a corpse. The boats sat idle, tied up at the marina like museum pieces. Vendors walked away, contracts were canceled, and the marina itself pulled our docking rights. The company name, my family's name, was being whispered about like it was toxic. And my father, the man who thought I'd come crawling back, that I'd fold under pressure, was now locked out of the very world he believed he owned. There was no part of me that felt guilt. I didn't take pleasure in watching him fall, But I wasn't mourning either. What I felt was something different. Clarity. I had spent my entire life trying to earn the approval of people who had never intended to give it. I had been building my life inside a cage, and worse, I had been the one reinforcing the bars. Now the cage was gone. That evening, I sat at my desk, typed one last email to the board formally severing my position, and deleted my corporate accounts. Then I packed a single bag, booked a one-way ticket somewhere warm, somewhere they'd never expect me to go. As I zipped the bag closed, I caught myself smiling. Not because I'd won, but because I finally understood that I'd never been playing their game in the first place. That night, I walked out onto my balcony. The city lights shimmered in the distance, and for the first time in years, my chest didn't feel heavy. My family, the business, the drama, all of it was behind me. And this time, there would be no going back. I was free, truly free. The update. 6 months later, it was like I had stepped into a different life. The noise was gone. No endless strings of missed calls. No urgent emails marked, "Read immediately." No relatives calling to guilt me back into the fold. My mornings started the same way almost every day. A fresh cup of coffee on my balcony, the salt breeze rolling in from the harbor, and the quiet hum of a town where no one knew my last name. After leaving the city, I bought a small condo in a coastal town 3 states away, the kind of place where the marina was the center of life, but no one cared about corporate politics or whose family name was painted on the side of a boat. My work was simple now, consulting for small, independent charters. I made enough to live well without living loud, enough to feel secure without chasing anyone's approval. That morning was like any other. I'd taken my laptop to a cafe near the docks, a little spot where the tables were close enough to the water that you could hear the halyards clinking against the masts. I was halfway through reviewing a client's maintenance schedule when I noticed a shadow fall across my table. I looked up and there he was, my father. He was almost unrecognizable. The sharp, commanding presence he used to carry had evaporated. His suit looked expensive, but it hung on him like it belonged to someone else. His skin was pale, his hair thinner, his eyes tired in a way I'd never seen before. "Mike," he said, voice low. There was no anger this time, no authority, just my name, like he wasn't sure if he still had the right to use it. I didn't invite him to sit, but he did anyway. For nearly a full minute he said nothing. His eyes wandered to the boats in the harbor, and I could see him remembering a time when he commanded fleets, when he believed the world bent to his will. Finally, his voice broke the quiet. "I lost everything." I nodded once. "I know." He glanced at me, searching for something. Maybe sympathy. Maybe a crack in my resolve. I watched him stop, staring at his hands like they might hold the words he wanted. I thought we could fix it. Maybe start over. There was a time I would have leaned forward, eager to believe him. But that version of me was gone. "You burned every bridge," I said. "And then you built a yacht and sailed away from the ashes." The line hit him. I could see it in the way his shoulders tightened. Maybe he was remembering the photo. Maybe he was realizing that the day in Santorini hadn't just been a vacation. It had been the moment he made sure I'd never come back. He didn't argue, didn't defend himself. He just turned back to the water, watching other people's boats glide in and out of the marina, all of them beyond his reach. When he finally stood, he looked older than I remembered. Smaller. He didn't offer his hand, and I didn't either. He walked away slowly, disappearing into the stream of tourists on the boardwalk, his figure folding into the crowd until he was gone completely. I turned back to my coffee. The sunlight was warm on my face. The breeze carried the smell of salt and diesel from the harbor. And for the first time in years, there was no weight in my chest. There was no anger, no triumph, just certainty. The past was over. The business was gone. And my father had nothing left to hold over me. I was free in the truest, most permanent way possible, and I intended to keep it that way. The update too. 2 weeks after that encounter at the Marina Cafe, I was sure it was over. The last loose thread had been cut. I'd stopped replaying our conversation in my head, stopped wondering if he'd try to reach out again. My mornings were quiet, my work was steady, and I had finally stopped looking over my shoulder. Then, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address. Just my name in bold block letters that pulled at my memory. Inside, one sheet of paper. No letterhead. No greeting. Just an address in the city I'd left behind, and underneath it 4 words. You'll want to see. I stood there in my kitchen, turning it over in my hands. It could have been junk, a prank, or something worse. But then it hit me. I knew that handwriting. It wasn't my father's, but I'd seen it on Christmas cards years ago. Jenna, my cousin. I didn't call her, didn't text. I just packed a bag and drove. The address took me to the waterfront's warehouse district, a part of the city that smelled like rust and stale water. The building was an old boat storage facility, its front door chained, but the side entrance left open just enough for someone to slip through. Inside, the air was thick with salt, oil, and decay. In the center of the vast, dim space sat 2 of our company's old yachts, or what was left of them. Once immaculate vessels, now reduced to shells. Paint blistered, deck rails rusted. Upholstery split open and green with mold. They looked like they hadn't seen the water in months. But the real discovery wasn't the boats. Along the far wall, stacked waist-high, were file boxes. Dozens of them. Contracts, receipts, thick folders stamped with confidential. I opened one and felt my stomach tighten. These weren't company books. They were my father's personal ledgers. Trips billed to clients that were clearly vacations. Large cash withdrawals timed to emergency maintenance calls that never happened. And worse, wire transfers to an offshore account in a country with no extradition treaty. It was all here in his handwriting, signed and dated. This wasn't sloppy bookkeeping. It was deliberate, organized, and damning enough to ruin him completely. It was then I realized why Jenna had sent me. This wasn't just information. It was a loaded weapon. If I handed it to the right people, my father wouldn't just lose what little was left of his standing. He'd be facing charges that could put him behind bars. I stood there for a long time, surrounded by the echo of dripping water, the stench of mold thick in the air. Part of me wanted to walk away, to let the whole mess rot with the yachts. But another part of me, the part that still remembered the Santorini photo, the caption, and every knife he'd stuck in my back, knew I'd never get a cleaner chance than this. The only question now was whether I was ready to pull the trigger. Now on to the next story. Story 6. At my cousin's engagement dinner, I said, "Can't wait for the getaway." I even upgraded the rooms. My mom blinked. My brother choked on his drink. My sister said flatly, "We were just thanking you for that. We got back Tuesday." I didn't even flinch. I just nodded, walked to the valet, and made one phone call. By morning, the refund was in process, the card locked, and every reservation tied to my name erased. Weddings bring out the best and worst in people. For my family, it's usually the worst, just with better clothes and smaller portions. My cousin Natalie was the bride, and the reception was being held at some overpriced vineyard she probably picked for the Instagram lighting. I was seated at a table with my siblings, my mom, and a few of Natalie's friends who looked like they got lost on the way to Coachella. I hadn't seen my family much lately. That wasn't an accident. Things between us had been tense for a while, but I figured maybe this wedding would be a reset button, a way to at least act like we were normal. I even thought it'd be a good time to remind them I was trying. I'd booked a family trip to Mexico, something I definitely didn't need to do, but felt like doing, something to show I cared. Maybe that was my first mistake. The DJ clanked the glass and announced open toasts. My Uncle Marty went first with a story no one asked for. My aunt followed with her voice cracking and everyone pretending not to look at their phones. Then I stood up. I hadn't planned to speak, but a couple drinks in, I felt good, generous. I held my glass up and said, "I can't wait for vacation." I even upgraded our rooms. It was meant as a light-hearted nod to the trip. A little reminder that I'd planned something nice. The silence that followed was louder than any applause could have been. My mom blinked like someone had just switched the channel on her brain. Eric, my brother, coughed so hard on his drink, I thought he was going to need the Heimlich. Rachel, of course, didn't miss a beat. She just looked at me and said, "Flat as a damn sidewalk. We just thanked you for that. We're coming back on Tuesday." There it was. No confusion, no hesitation, just a correction. Like I was the idiot for not realizing I'd been cut out of my own plan. It was like time slowed down for a second. I looked at them. No one said anything. Not even a sorry or we thought you were busy, or anything remotely human. Just smug silence. They had used my name, my credit card, my plans, and left me out. They had taken everything and assumed I'd just sit back and let it happen. And the worst part, they didn't even try to hide it. I didn't flinch. I just nodded once, walked out past the bar, through the lobby, and to the valet stand. The guy handed me my keys like I was going for a smoke. I got in my car and sat there for maybe 5 minutes before I called the resort. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I just canceled everything. The rooms, the excursions, the airport pickups, all of it. The resort manager was surprisingly chill about it once I confirmed the bookings were under my name. I didn't even need to give a reason. The refund was processed overnight, and I blocked the card I'd used just in case someone got clever. They had no idea. Not yet. 3 days later, I'd find out they were still at the airport trying to figure out why the tickets weren't working. But I'll get to that because that was just the start. The next few weeks were going to bring out things in my family that even I didn't expect. Turns out you cancel one vacation and people start to show who they really are. And I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. I didn't hear from any of them for 3 days. Not a peep. No. Thank you. No. We're boarding. Nothing. I checked my email once or twice just to make sure the cancellation had gone through. It had. Every last dollar back in my account, minus the non-refundable welcome fruit basket. Then the group chat exploded. It was a family thread we barely used, mostly birthday reminders and the occasional blurry dog picture from my mom. I was at home drinking coffee and watching some cooking show with the volume down when my phone started vibrating like it was trying to run away. Eric, bro, what did you do? Rachel, why are the reservations canceled? Mom, call me now. Eric, are you serious right now? Rachel, we're at the gate and the tickets aren't working. Mom? I didn't respond. I watched the little typing bubbles come and go for a few minutes. Then I muted the chat and went on with my day. I had a feeling what was coming next, and I wasn't going to let them have it easy. By the time I finally answered my mom's call that evening, she was in full meltdown mode. They were still at the airport trying to figure out what to do. Apparently, they had flown from different cities, met at the layover in Houston, and were supposed to board together, but everything under my name had been wiped clean. The hotel told them they had no reservation. Their flights were void. No transport was waiting. I told her the truth. I said, I found it interesting that everyone made plans behind my back for a trip I organized and paid for, and no one thought I deserved to be part of it. I told her it was weird that I wasn't even asked. I didn't raise my voice. I just asked why they thought I wouldn't find out. She got quiet. Then she said something that really stuck. You're always so dramatic. That was her response. Not an apology, not an explanation, just blame. Like I was the problem for not silently accepting being left out of my own gift. Eric and Rachel called later that night. I didn't answer either of them. Rachel left a voicemail that started civil but quickly turned into a guilt trip about how mom was crying and I ruined everything. Eric texted me something about being selfish and immature. That was when I realized none of them actually cared that they'd cut me out. They just cared they got caught. I was tempted to just block them and move on. But then I remembered what else was tied to my name. A few weeks earlier, Rachel had asked me to co-sign her lease. She said she was just having trouble getting approved and it would be temporary. I never even told her I did it. Just put my name down when the leasing agent asked for it. Eric, he had been using my Netflix account for over a year. I only knew because he renamed his profile to The King. And my mom, she still used my login for her pharmacy account because she didn't remember how to reset the password. Guess who was listed as her emergency contact? They thought the vacation was the big move. They didn't realize I had more cards in hand. Rachel folded first. I knew she would. She always burns bright and fast. Big energy, dramatic posts, loud exits. But when she's cornered, she caves. It was 5 days after the airport fiasco when I got the first message. One of those long, choppy texts written like a diary entry. She said it was a misunderstanding, that she didn't mean to leave me out, that she thought I was busy with work and wouldn't want to go anyway, which is hilarious considering she begged me to help book the trip 2 months ago. I scrolled through her message like I was reviewing a contract. She actually wrote, "We didn't mean for you to feel excluded, right?" As if I was being sensitive for realizing I wasn't invited to a trip I paid for. I didn't respond. I didn't block her either. I just logged into the leasing portal for her apartment. I pulled up the info, scanned through her rent history. 3 late payments, 2 noise complaints, 1 warning. That was enough. I called the office and asked what I needed to do to remove my name. They emailed me a release form. I signed it within 10 minutes. That was it. No fight, no warning. 3 days later, she texted, "What the hell? I just got a notice. I need a new cosigner. You serious right now?" I didn't reply. Eric was trickier. He doesn't come at you directly. He circles. I noticed his profile disappeared from my Netflix the same day the group chat blew up. I guess he knew it was coming. But that was just one login. Over the past few years, he'd gotten comfortable using my info. Spotify, Hulu, Uber, Amazon Prime. He once used my Grubhub account to order wings and forgot to tip. I started locking everything down. New passwords, deactivated devices, emails to customer service. One by one, I watched the dominoes fall. The Uber account got flagged when he tried to change the card and failed the security question. Spotify booted him mid-song. I could almost picture the look on his face. It was satisfying. He didn't text right away. He waited, probably hoping it would reverse itself. Then I got the Venmo request, $1.73 shared stuff last few months. I declined it and sent back one line. "This wasn't shared. You just took." Still nothing from him after that. And my mom, that was the hard one. Not because I owed her anything, but because she had a way of talking that made you feel like you did. Like you were born into a debt you could never quite pay off. She called 4 times. I ignored the first 3. On the 4th, I picked up. She launched right in. How I humiliated the family. How I ruined a trip everyone was looking forward to. How she had to sleep on the airport floor because I threw a tantrum. I let her talk. I was calm. I asked her one question when she finally paused. "When did you all decide I didn't need to be there?" There was a long silence. Then she said, "You're always so sensitive. You overreact. We didn't think it would be a big deal." And there it was. I didn't scream. I didn't hang up. I told her I'd removed myself from her pharmacy account. I told her to call the help desk if she needed anything. Then I said, "Stop using me like I'm not in the room. I see everything. I remember everything. And I'm not cleaning up anymore." She didn't say much after that. I spent the next few days cleaning digital traces. I unlinked accounts, canceled autopays, deleted logins. They hadn't just borrowed things. They built part of their lives on the assumption I'd always fund the background. They didn't even notice when they leaned on me. But now they noticed the gap. And this wasn't revenge yet. This was just subtraction. I was still holding the real move. The one they'd never see coming. It started with a dinner invite. Rachel texted first, "Mom's making dinner Sunday. You should come. Let's talk." I didn't answer. I waited a few hours and then Eric followed up with, "We should clear the air." Like this was some kind of awkward office misunderstanding. Then my mom tried calling again. When I didn't pick up, she left a voicemail. She said she wanted to make peace, that she was willing to forgive. That last part almost made me laugh. I knew what it was. They were regrouping. I had pulled the plug on their convenience faucet and now they were trying to fix the leak. I could have just ignored them again, but something about the phrasing, the way they kept saying, "Let's fix this," without ever admitting what they did, made my skin crawl. So I wrote a message. It wasn't long. No all caps, no swearing, no guilt tripping, just clear and cold. "You used me. You lied. You excluded me from something I paid for. And you only cared when it affected you. That's not family. That's manipulation. I'm not coming to dinner. I'm not fixing anything. And I'm not playing this game anymore. I'm not your safety net. I'm not your cosigner, your subscription service, or your personal travel agent. You made your choices. Live with them." I hit send. Read it twice. Then I muted the thread and for a while nothing happened. A day passed. Then another. I almost thought they got the message. Then Rachel posted on Facebook a long, tear-stained paragraph about how some people in your life turn on you without warning and even family can betray you. She didn't name me, but it was obvious. Comments rolled in. Friends I hadn't seen in years chimed in with vague sympathy. Some even liked it. Then Eric made a post, too. Some meme about snakes in the grass. Again, not direct but not subtle either. I didn't respond. I didn't post. I didn't defend myself. I just sent a message to Rachel's landlord. Her late payments had triggered a lease review. Without a cosigner, she was officially in violation. They gave her 30 days to fix it or leave. Eric's Spotify account was still under my name. I kept it active, but I changed the email, then the password, then the playlists. Every time he opened the app, it played the same track, elevator music. Nothing else would load. Petty maybe, but he deserved worse. My mom, though, she stayed quiet. No posts, no texts. I almost thought she was done. But then I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was her doctor's office. She'd listed me as her emergency contact, and apparently she'd come in for a checkup and forgot to bring her insurance card. They were calling me to verify it. I told them I wasn't the contact anymore and to update their file. That was it. By then, it wasn't about revenge. It was about closure. They'd spent years turning me into the background character in my own story. Always the helper, never the guest. Always the ATM, never the invite. Now they were seeing what the story looked like without me. And I wasn't done yet, because there was still one thing left. One move that would finally end the game. After everything, the silence was almost eerie. 2 weeks. Not a word from any of them. No texts, no calls, no side comments online. Even Rachel's drama posts dried up. At first, I thought maybe they'd finally gotten the message. But then I remembered who I was dealing with. My family doesn't apologize. They regroup. I used to think the cold shoulder was the worst part of conflict. But there's something worse when you know someone's just waiting to see if you'll fold. That was their game now. Wait me out. Pretend nothing happened. See if I'd crawl back out of guilt just like before. Except this time I wasn't guilty. I was free. And while they were lying low, I started tying off the last loose ends. I wasn't just cutting myself out of their mess. I was clearing my name from everything they might have tied to me without asking. It started with the bank. Rachel had asked me months ago if she could use my name for a better rate on a savings account she couldn't qualify for a loan. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. She took that as permission. I found out she'd opened a joint account, listed me as a co-owner, and started funneling rent payments through it. It took one trip to the branch to shut it down. I closed the account, flagged her for unauthorized access, and moved on. Then I remembered something worse. The family trust. Back when our grandfather passed, a small trust had been set up for the grandkids. Nothing huge, but enough to be meaningful when we hit a certain age. I was listed as the family contact mostly because no one else wanted to deal with legal paperwork. I hadn't touched it in years. I logged in. The trustee had notes. Rachel had tried to get an early payout 3 months ago. Claimed it was for surgery. Even sent in a typed letter signed with a digital signature that looked like it was copied from an old email. The request was denied. No medical records, no verification, just her trying to bend the rules. Eric? He tried the same thing, only he used the excuse of needing a down payment for a family car. A phrase that felt rehearsed. He doesn't even have a license. Neither of them told me. I made the call the next day, told the trustee I wanted my name off everything. No more communications, no more involvement. While I was at it, I asked if there was a way to flag suspicious activity. The guy on the phone was polite but sounded tired. Apparently, mine wasn't the first call like this. He said he'd add notes to the file and remove me as the primary contact. I get no more updates, no more questions. Good. Then came the final cleanup, a letter, not a text, not an email, an actual envelope mailed the old-fashioned way. I printed out copies and sent one to each of them, to Rachel, Eric, and Mom. As of today, I've severed all formal and informal ties. I've removed my name from every account, login, lease, service, or connection you've used or created with me. Any current usage of my identity or finances will be treated as fraud. This is not a conversation. This is notification. Family isn't blood. It's behavior. You showed me who you are. Now I'm showing you who I am without you. Michael, that should have been the end. But it wasn't. A week later, I got a call from a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. It was Natalie, my cousin, the one whose wedding started it all. Her voice was quiet, but what she said was clear. She told me I wasn't the only one. Apparently, a few other relatives had been used, too. One for a cosign on Eric's failed car loan. Another for Rachel's old tuition debt she never repaid. And now Natalie had found out something else. Something big. Something I hadn't seen coming at all. My mom had opened a credit card in my name 3 years ago, and it was still active. When I heard Natalie's voicemail, I didn't react at first, just sat there listening. It was late and I was already in bed. I stared at the ceiling in the dark and let her voice repeat in my head. You need to check your credit report. Your mom opened a card in your name. 3 years ago. She used it. It's still active. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning I pulled my credit report. I had checked it before, but not closely. Not like this. I looked through every line, every old account, every unfamiliar detail. And there it was. An open card with a $6,000 limit, registered to an address I didn't live at, with a mailing name that matched mine almost exactly, just missing the junior. She had applied for it using my name but changed the mailing info. I checked the transaction history. Grocery stores, utility bills, a couple big purchases at home decor chains, a cruise deposit. It had been paid mostly on time, enough to not raise red flags. But the balance was sitting at $5,724. I called the credit company, pretending to be confused about the account. I asked for the application date, the method of application, everything. They said it was opened with a social security number, mine, but listed a different email and phone. I asked for copies of the application and statements to be mailed to my address. I wanted a paper trail. After I hung up, I just sat there for a while. There's a specific kind of betrayal that comes from your mother doing something like this. It's not rage. It's not even sadness. It's like someone reached inside you and turned something cold, quiet, final. I didn't confront her right away. I waited until the paperwork arrived. The signature box on the application was a blurry scroll. Not mine. The email she used was one I'd seen before, her backup, the one she used when she forgot passwords. I made copies of everything. Then I filed a fraud report with the credit company. I wasn't going to press charges. Not yet. But I wanted the card closed, the account removed from my history, and a fraud flag placed under her name. Then I wrote her one last letter. Mom, you opened a card in my name. You used it. You lied. I didn't say anything for years. Not about the small things. Not about the big ones. I let you take and take and take because I thought that's what you do for family. But this is theft. And you knew it. I've reported the card. You'll get the bill. You'll pay it or deal with the consequences. Either way, I'm not involved anymore. We're done. Michael. I sent it by certified mail. She had to sign for it. I never got a reply, but Natalie called again a week later. Told me she'd heard through someone else that my mom was furious. Not sorry, not regretful, just angry she got caught. Rachel called Natalie, too. Tried to make it sound like I was tearing the family apart. But Natalie didn't buy it. She said something that stuck with me. You didn't destroy the family. You just stopped pretending it wasn't already broken. That was it. That was the final thread. The truth is, they weren't my family anymore. They were people I used to share a house with. People who took what they wanted and assumed I'd be too tired or too nice or too ashamed to say no. But not anymore. I got a new phone number, new email, changed every password. My apartment's quieter now. No drama. No unexpected bills. No fake affection wrapped in guilt. It's just me and peace. And that's worth more than any vacation. The mini update. It had been 2 months since I sent the last letter. No contact, no drama. I thought it was finally over. Then I got an envelope in the mail. No return address, just my name and handwriting I recognized right away. It was from my mom. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No, dear Michael, no apology, just one sentence. I hope you're proud of yourself. That was it. No signature. Nothing else. I sat there holding the paper for a long time. Not because it hurt, but because it confirmed everything. Even now, even after all the damage, she still couldn't admit what she did. She still wanted it to be my fault. Like all I'd ever been was a tool that stopped working when she needed it most. I folded the letter in half, slid it back into the envelope, and dropped it in the trash. That sentence told me more than any apology ever could. She didn't miss me. She missed using me. And that was the last thing I ever heard from her. Now on to the next story. Story 7. I refused to go on a family vacation to Hawaii because they invited my narcissistic sister. We'll just give your ticket to her then, Mom wrote. I was angry and canceled all the tickets. Next day, they invited me to a family reunion. And when I arrived, I was shocked. 8 days before my birthday, I was supposed to get ready for Hawaii. A week on Oahu, just me and my parents. They called it a birthday trip. Said it was their way of making up for some things in the past. And I let myself believe it. I even started to think that maybe we were turning a corner. I'd been working nonstop for months, barely taking any time off, and they kept saying it was just going to be us. No drama, no interruptions. That last part turned out to be a lie. So here's the context. I live in the same town as my parents, but I moved out a while ago. I got my own place after I realized I couldn't stand living under the same roof as people who constantly made excuses for my sister. They never really saw her for who she was. Or maybe they did and just didn't care. My sister and I had been on bad terms for years. She once cheated me out of several thousand money I'd saved while working my way through college. She said she needed help with rent and a car repair and swore she'd pay me back. Not only did she not pay me back, she ghosted me for months. Then she had the nerve to show up at a family dinner and act like everything was fine. My parents never confronted her about it. They told me to let it go, that she was going through a lot. She's always going through a lot. A few years ago, she moved out of state for school. Some town I don't care enough to remember. Rented a room supposedly studying psychology or sociology or some ironic thing. She rarely visits, which used to be a relief. So, when I got the call that she'd shown up unannounced at my parents' house, I already knew something was about to go sideways. I told them right away, if she's coming on the Hawaii trip, I'm out. They said it was just a visit. No mention of her joining us. I didn't push, but I stayed away from them all week. I didn't even want to run into her. Then, exactly 8 days before the flight, I got the call. My dad, pretending to give me a weather report, said, "So, your sister spent some time with us. We really missed her." I didn't say anything. He goes on, "She hasn't had a break for a long time. If you're really not going, maybe we'll give her your ticket. She could use a vacation." Just like that, as if the ticket wasn't bought for me. Like the whole trip wasn't planned around my birthday. I felt something burning in my throat. I didn't argue. I didn't even answer. I just hung up. I sat in silence for a while. Then I opened my laptop and canceled every single reservation. Flights, hotel, the car, the dinner I booked at that place on the coast I'd wanted to try since I was 17. Everything, all under my name and credit card because they said they'd pay me back after the trip. Typical. They found out an hour later. First the calls, then the texts, then the group chat. My mom said I was overreacting. My dad said I was being petty. And then, as if that weren't enough, they tried to make it all about them by inviting me to a family reunion barbecue that weekend. Said it would be a way to get things back on track. They said my sister would be there and I should be the bigger person. I shouldn't have gone, but I did. And that's when everything started to spiral. I pulled up to my parents' house already regretting it. I parked 2 blocks away on purpose, partly because I didn't want anyone to see me leaving early, which I figured I probably would. The invitation had said, family reunion. But it was really just a backyard barbecue, the kind they always threw when they wanted to pretend everything was fine. I hadn't been to one in almost 2 years. The place was packed. Aunts, uncles, cousins, some random neighbors, even people I didn't recognize. It looked like they went out of their way to make this thing big. like they wanted an audience. I grabbed a beer from the cooler and stood near the fence, trying not to talk to anyone. I didn't see my sister at first, which gave me a little false hope. My mom waved me over, all smiles, introduced me to some woman from church, and then acted like nothing had happened. I played along for a minute before ducking off to the food table. That's when I ran into Uncle Mike. He didn't even say hello. He just laughed and said, "So, you're big brother of the year now, huh? Giving up your birthday vacation for your sister. Are you two finally burying the hatchet?" I thought he was joking. I said I didn't know what he meant. He looked surprised. "That's what she said. She said you felt bad and gave her the Hawaii trip." I didn't answer. I walked away, grabbed another beer just to have something to hold on to. My head was spinning. She was telling people that I gave her the ticket, that it was a selfless act. I hadn't spoken to her since last year, and now she was using me to rewrite history. Then I saw her by the grill next to my dad, laughing like she hadn't burned every bridge between us. She was wearing one of those airy dresses that looked expensive, sunglasses pushed up on her head, holding a wine glass like she belonged in a magazine ad for coastal reunions. I didn't say anything at first. I just watched her, trying to figure out how deep this lie went. Then I walked right up to her and told her we needed to talk. She followed me around the side of the house as if we were going to have a heart-to-heart. I asked her what she was doing, why she was lying. She shrugged. "What does it matter? You canceled the trip. You weren't going." I figured if anyone was going to enjoy it, it might as well be me. I stared at her. She didn't even try to hide it. "And you told people I gave it to you?" She smiled. "It's a better story. Makes you look good. Everybody wins." I turned and walked away. I didn't say anything to my parents. I just walked to the gate. But then my dad called my name from across the yard, loud enough that everyone stopped talking. "You can't just walk away from your family." I stopped, turned around. "She stole from me," I said. "She's lying to you. She's lying to everyone here. And you just keep making room for her to do it." Then I walked out. I didn't go home. I drove for a while. No real direction. Just had to get out of the area. I ended up at this diner on the edge of town, the kind that never updates the menu and always smells like burnt coffee. I sat in a booth by the window and ordered a coffee I didn't want. I was halfway through when my phone buzzed. Unknown number, just a picture. It was my sister sitting on a hotel bed, the ocean behind her through the balcony doors. She had a drink in her hand and a smug look on her face. The caption read, "Thanks for the upgrade. You really shouldn't have." That's when it hit me. I'd canceled the original reservations, but a few days earlier, I'd forwarded the email confirmations to my mom. She'd asked for them because she wanted to check out the hotel. My sister must have seen them. Maybe she logged into my travel account from the link. Maybe she guessed my password. Somehow, she reactivated the booking using my information. So while I was sitting in a roadside diner, she was checking into a suite in Oahu. And then I realized something even worse. My credit card had never been removed from the reservation. The hotel charged my card for the entire stay. I found out the next morning when I got a notice from my bank. Almost $5,000. Gone. I stared at the message for a full minute before reality set in. I called the hotel immediately, got transferred twice, finally got through to someone who told me yes, the reservation had been reactivated under my name. Yes, someone checked in yesterday. Yes, she used the confirmation code and photo ID. I asked if it matched my name. The guy hesitated, then said she presented an ID that matched the last name and, well, we had no reason to question it. That's how sloppy the system is. She printed out an old fake student ID that she probably had lying around. Probably changed her name to mine in some online generator. And they let her right in. I hung up and stared at my phone for a long time. I wanted to scream. Instead, I opened a dispute with the bank, but I already knew how this was going to go. It was a shared account. I'd forwarded the email and the hotel would say it wasn't their fault. I'd be lucky to get half the money back after weeks of arguing. I went to work but couldn't concentrate. I kept checking her social media. Nothing. All private. Then I checked my mom's Facebook. That's when I saw it. A new post. A group photo. My sister on the beach with my parents. All three of them smiling. My dad in flip-flops. My mom holding a pineapple drink. My sister in the middle like the whole trip was built around her. They went with her. They booked new tickets. Or maybe she talked them into it. Maybe she told them it would make peace if they all went. I don't know. But there they were in Hawaii celebrating my birthday without me. Smiling like none of them were sick. And no one told me. No phone call, no message, no nothing. Just silence, like I didn't exist. I didn't go home that night either. I went back to the diner. The same waitress from yesterday brought me a refill without asking. I must have looked like I felt. Then, as I scrolled through emails on my phone, one popped up from the building management company that handles my apartment. Subject line, Notice regarding unit access. I opened it. Apparently, my sister had shown up that afternoon claiming an emergency, saying she was locked out of her apartment and needed to get some things. She gave them my apartment number, said she was on the lease, and they let her in. I called my landlord right away. He said she was convincing, said she had a key, which meant she never returned the spare from years ago when we briefly tried to live together. I completely forgotten she had one. I rushed home. My front door wasn't damaged. Nothing looked broken. But inside, things were just different. One of my drawers was open. My medicine cabinet had been ransacked. Some papers from my desk were gone. The flash drive I kept by my modem was gone. So was my backup checkbook. I was sitting on the floor, just sitting there in the middle of my living room. It had come with me on my trip. My money, now my apartment, all in less than 72 hours. She was escalating, and I had no idea what was coming. I didn't sleep that night. I checked every drawer, every closet. I don't know what I expected to find missing. Maybe something worse than what was already gone. But it was the things I couldn't see that kept me awake. My files, the flash drive, the checkbook. She could do anything with them. Anything. By morning, I had a plan. Enough was enough. I'd spent years fending her off, letting my parents handle it, trying not to make a scene. But this wasn't just about me anymore. She'd broken into my house, taken my money, and now she was walking around like none of it mattered. So, I started to document everything. I printed out every bank transaction, every hotel bill, every text and photo. I searched my email for every travel confirmation, screen captured her message with the Hawaii hotel photo, and even pulled footage from the doorbell cam outside my building. There she was in the middle of the afternoon, wearing a hoodie and sunglasses, walking out with a tote bag she hadn't come in with. I took everything to the local police station. I didn't know what to expect. I thought maybe they'd tell me it was a civil matter or that I needed a lawyer, but the guy at the desk actually listened, asked for copies, said it sounded like potential fraud and trespassing. He said it would be given to a detective. Later that day, while I was waiting for an update, she posted a video on Instagram, public account. I guess she forgot to block me this time. It was of her on a rooftop pool, cocktail in hand, doing that slow pan of the view with her phone. Then she turned the camera around and smiled. Some of us were just born to travel, she said. Some people can't handle success. I recorded the whole thing on my screen. The next segment was even better. She filmed a room tour of the hotel suite, showing off a gift basket with a note, "Happy birthday, Bree. Mom and Dad." She panned to the TV screen where she pulled up an old video from my YouTube account. A stupid cheesy birthday vlog I made years ago. She laughed at it like the whole trip was a tribute to the person she'd stolen it from. That's when I lost it. I took the new footage and went straight back to the station. The guy behind the desk called someone, and within 10 minutes a plainclothes detective came out to talk to me in a side room. He watched the tapes, listened to the backstory. "You said she used a fake ID?" he asked. "Or altered mine?" "She used my name to check in." He nodded slowly. "Between the financial charges, the unauthorized entry into your apartment, and the misuse of your identity, this isn't small potatoes anymore." He took down more details. I gave him my sister's phone number, email, the address she used to live at in Tucson, everything I had. A report was filed. I walked out of there feeling lighter, but not stupid. I knew this wasn't going to end with one visit from law enforcement, but it was the first real step I'd taken in years to fight back. The next day, I woke up to 3 missed phone calls from my mother. Then a long message. Said they were cutting their trip short, that something had happened. I didn't call back. I just waited. Then there was a knock on my door. Not the police. It was my father. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept either. He asked if he could come in. I didn't answer. I just stood there. She says you're trying to ruin her life, he said. I told him I wasn't. I was just tired of letting her ruin mine. He looked at me as if for the first time he really saw it. Then he said, "They're looking for her. She ran away. She ran from Hawaii and she didn't go back to school. Nobody knew where she went. She didn't disappear like someone in a crime drama. There was no mystery, no strange voicemail or missing car. She just took off." After my dad said she ran away, I asked what he meant. He said the hotel had been visited by some local authorities who wanted to talk to her. She wasn't in the room. She had left a few hours earlier. Staff said she seemed nervous, threw some things in a bag and went out the front door, called for a ride. By the time they found out she was gone, she'd already turned off her phone. The police back here were notified. Technically, she wasn't a fugitive or anything, just a person of interest in an open case. Fraud, unauthorized access, ID misuse, nothing violent, nothing that would get her face on the news. Still, she knew it was serious. My mom called next. I let it go to voicemail. She didn't sound upset. She sounded embarrassed. Said she was trying to reach my sister, but it went straight to voicemail. Said they were flying back that night. No apology. Just this strange message about how things got out of hand. 2 days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. It was her. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask what I had told the police. She jumped right in. "I didn't steal from you. I just used what was already mine." I didn't answer. She kept talking. She said I owed her for what I put her through when we were younger. She said I always made her feel like she was the problem. That our parents had babied me. That I was just as manipulative, just quieter. Then she told me the real reason she left the hotel. It wasn't fear or guilt. It wasn't some dramatic escape. She said she had met someone at the bar that night. A guy from LA said he was loaded and liked how real she was. Told her to come to California with him. So she did. Just packed a bag, called a car, and left. She didn't leave to hide. She left because she saw a better offer. Selfish. Classic. I asked her why she called me in the first place. She was quiet for a second, then said, "Because when they come looking for me, I want you to tell them that you misunderstood, that it wasn't like that." I told her no. She didn't argue. She just said, "You're really doing this? You're going to burn the bridge completely?" I said, "The bridge was already burned." She burned it. Before she hung up, she said, "You always thought you were better than me." Then the line went dead. That night, my parents came over. I didn't invite them, but they stood on my porch and asked to talk to me. My mother cried. My dad tried to be a mediator. He said they didn't know she was using my information, that they thought the trip would make things better, that they couldn't imagine she'd take it this far. I said one sentence, that was it. She didn't disappear because she was afraid. She left because she found something brighter. They didn't respond. My father gave me a folded envelope. He said it was a check. A little more than what the trip cost me. I took it, but it didn't fix anything. The strangest thing was how normal everything felt after that. She was gone. No one knew where. No one wanted to admit they were relieved. A month passed. No word from her, no updates from the police, and for the first time in what felt like years, it was quiet. I didn't trust it. I kept waiting for something else to happen. A credit report, a call from someone she had scammed, another hotel bill. But nothing came. It was like she disappeared into the LA smog, and the whole disaster froze in time. I concentrated on putting things back in order. I changed my passwords, checked my accounts every morning, even installed a new locking system on my apartment. I didn't talk to my parents much except when they sent me official letters. Apparently, the police were still looking for her, and now the hotel had filed its own complaint. Unauthorized use of services, false identification, some state-level charges. I didn't ask what the charges were. I just knew they weren't light. Then 3 weeks ago, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten, no return address. It was from her. 6 pages, rambling, defensive, all over the place. She said the guy she met in LA dumped her the second he realized she didn't really have any money. She was living in someone's guest room in a Long Beach suburb, sleeping on an inflatable mattress, bouncing between temp jobs and favors. She said she was using someone else's phone, which was why no one could find her. She admitted to taking the flash drive, said she thought it had something valuable on it, but all it had were tax documents and old resumes. She called it useless. She said she tore up the checkbook and threw it in a dumpster behind a strip mall. The letter ended with a sentence that I read 10 times before it sank in. I should have just asked for help, but I knew you wouldn't give it, so I took what I thought I deserved. That line stuck with me, not because it surprised me, but because it was the most honest thing she'd ever said. I gave a copy of the letter to the detective working the case. 2 days later, they found her. She was picked up in a borrowed car outside a liquor store using a fake ID with a blurry photo of herself and a made-up name. No resistance, no drama. She didn't even speak as they handcuffed her. The charges piled up quickly. Fraud, identity theft, unlawful entry, a couple of open warrants for things I didn't even know existed in Arizona. The court date came and went. I didn't go. I didn't have to. The detective called me afterwards. She pleaded guilty to avoid trial. 18 months, no bail. She's in a facility somewhere in California now. Not a prison. One of those halfway houses with locked doors and group sessions. They said she cried at the sentencing, begged for probation, said she had nowhere else to go. But it didn't matter. She got what she gave, nothing. My parents didn't visit her. My mother sent a letter and never heard back. My dad hasn't mentioned her since. I kept the envelope she sent me, not because I forgive her. I don't. I keep it as proof that I was right to finally stop protecting her. That no matter how much people say family is everything, there are lines. Lines you don't cross. And if you do, if you keep crossing them, you can't act surprised when the world finally calls you on it. She called me once from the facility. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. It was short. Guess I'm out of options. Hope you're happy. And honestly, I am. 6 months passed. By then, I had stopped thinking about her every day. Life started to flow again. I focused on work, finally took a solo trip to Colorado, and got serious about my own stuff. Health, finances, people who actually mattered. My apartment started to feel like mine again. Then last week, I got a call from the detective who'd been working her case. I didn't recognize the number and almost ignored it. He said, "You were listed as the primary complainant, so I wanted to let you know before you heard it from anyone else. Your sister has filed a petition." I braced myself. What kind of petition? She's asking to be transferred to a restorative justice program, nonviolent offenders, structured rehab, work release, that kind of thing, but only if the victims agree. Victims. That word hit me a little funny. I asked him what that meant for me. He said I didn't have to answer. I could ignore it and the default would be denial. But if I agreed, they'd offer her a place in a strict program. No loopholes, full financial restitution, mandatory therapy, supervised job placement, and if she screwed up even once, she'd serve the full original sentence. I told him I needed time. I didn't respond right away. I reread her old letter. I looked through the folder where I kept all the paperwork, screenshots, receipts, photos. Then I called my dad. He hadn't heard. My mom had. She didn't know what to think. Neither of them pushed me for once. They stayed out of it. 2 days later, I signed the form and sent it in. Not because I wanted her to get off easy, but because making her pay it all back, work it off. That sounded like justice. Real justice. And last night, I got an email from the program coordinator. She'd been accepted. They attached the first signed document from her end. A formal acceptance, full responsibility, no denial, no deflection. For the first time, she wrote something without blaming anyone else. She has to pay every cent down to the hotel bill. They enclosed the spreadsheet. Monthly payments, verified work reports, everything. But the last one surprised me the most. There's a notes section at the bottom of the file. She was allowed to write something short, not a letter, just a sentence. She wrote, I don't expect forgiveness, but I am willing to own what I have done. That's it. No excuses, no guilt trips. I printed out that page and taped it to the inside of my closet door. Not because it changed anything between us, but because I never thought I'd see the day when she stopped pretending. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real beginning. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.